broadcasting on 105.5 FM.
The Honorable Speaker.
Almighty God, we give thanks to you, the creator of the universe, and humbly beseech you to direct and prosper the deliberations of the members of this house here assembled for the advancement of your glory and the trust and welfare of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Grant that peace and happiness, truth and justice may be established among us for all generations. Amen. Amen. Namaste.
Oath or affirmation. Announcements by the Speaker.
Honorable members, Dr. Lakram P. Bodo, MP, member for Faisabad, has requested leave of absence from sittings of the House during the period January 6th to 18th, 2018. Dr. Suraj Ratan Rambachan, MP, member for Tabakit, Mrs. Vidya Gayadeen Gopi Singh, MP, member for Urupuch West, Mr. Rushton Pare, MP, member for Miaru, Mr. Rudranath Indar Singh, MP, member for Kuva South, Mr. Ganga Singh, MP, member for Shogunas West, Mr. Prakash Ramadan, MP, member for St. Augustine, Mrs. Glenda Jennings-Smith, MP, member for Toko Sandy Grande, and Mr. Barry Padarath, MP, member for Princestown, have requested leave of absence from today's sitting of the House. And Mr. Maxi Coffey, MP, member for La Hoketa Talparu, has requested leave of absence from sittings of the House during the month of January 2018. The leave which the members seek is granted. Honorable members, as you may be aware, one of our prominent sons of the soil, Professor George Maxwell Richards, TC, CMTT, PhD, former President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, passed away on Monday, January 8, 2018. As we mourn his passing, we also honor the rich legacy he has left behind. I now invite honorable members to pay their respective tributes to Professor Maxwell Richards, George Maxwell Richards. Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, as a nation, we come face to face with these realities, and I dare say, our own mortality, where we acknowledge the passing of one of our distinguished citizens. Distinguished not because he lived a life for himself, but because he has been such a contributor to the building of this nation. Madam Speaker, in our population of 1.3 million people at this time, we can point to very many people who have made sterling contributions to who we are, and what we'll become. But there are few of our citizens who can better demonstrate that kind of individual, more so than Professor George Maxwell Richards. It is indeed for me, Madam Speaker, a very personal event, since I have known in my younger life Professor Richards at the university where I worked, and he was my boss for many years. And in fact, he has been a person who encouraged the best out of Trinidad and Tobago. And there are many citizens who can count their own progress as having been influenced by the very nature of the man whose passing today we acknowledge. Professor Richards started out, as I might say, as a normal citizen, reaching out for the opportunities in this land and grabbing them with both hands, educating himself to the highest level and holding responsibility at the management level, at the teacher level, and eventually he got to the top of the university at St. Augustine and within the university structure of UWI, being responsible for generations of our young people and ensuring that they become the best that they could be. Madam Speaker, he wasn't content to just be that. He also wanted to be the normal citizen, supporting all other aspects of life in this country, from the well-known local good time party to the search for scientific knowledge and scientific input into our well-being. Professor Richards was such a normal man that he is better known as Max, a term of endearment that encapsulates how people saw him. Even though he was professor, he was president. He offered himself into public life and was accepted. And eventually, Madam Speaker, he was selected, much to the benefit of the national community, as our president of this republic, and served 2 terms, trying to guide us along the pathway so that we can realize the potential that is held out to us as a people. As president, there were many occasions that he too did have his dark days, but such is life, that even as president of the republic, you cannot expect that every day you will please everyone. But Professor Richards gave us on many occasions words of wisdom and words of encouragement, which, if visited at this time, will provide us with the hope and the encouragement that this country needs. In being what he had become and what he will be known for in our history, we have to acknowledge the role played by his family, because he was also a family man. And today we want to acknowledge the role played by his family in supporting him along the way from the oil fields to the university to the president's house, for supporting him and allowing him to serve this nation for decades. As we look forward to what the future holds for our young people, some of whom are in this hall today from my constituency, we want to think and hope that there are still in our community people like Professor George Maxwell Richards who can do for them what he did for people like me and my colleagues in this chamber. Trinidad and Tobago has lost not just a son of the soil, but a stalwart, highly respected across the board. And as we mourn his passing, we thank God that he was a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago. May he rest in peace.
Member for Superior.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, as we welcome this opportunity to reflect on the life of and to honor a patriot and a statesman, former President Professor George Maxwell Richards. I endorse indeed the statements made by my honorable colleague, the Honorable Prime Minister, and I was reminded while the Prime Minister was speaking that I should say one thing with former President Maxwell Richards is that he lived life to the max in every sense of the word. And he served our country, his country, with distinction for 2 terms, 2003 to 2013. During that time, he made a tremendous impact on our country and indeed on many young persons of Trinidad and Tobago. He was outspoken. He did not shy away from making his views known about issues of national interest. But what he is probably most remembered for is his love for life, our culture, our music, and the people of this country. Indeed, I listened to his spouse, Dr. Jean Ramjan Richards, and her description, I think, is totally apt as we mourn him, as we pay tribute to him, when she said that the most impressive thing about him was his joie de vivre, and that, again, living life to the max. His exuberance for our country's carnival endeared him to many, and we can all recall his very vibrant and jovial nature as he participated with friends and family in the greatest show on earth each year. Madam Speaker, it would be remiss of me not to mention that his love birthed what we knew as Max Richards and Friends, a very popular carnival fete which still exists today, perhaps under another name. Professor Richards spends much of his life in service to others as well, through his hard work with various charities, and he was held in high esteem by all who knew him and of him. Indeed, a great family man. He clearly took pride and satisfaction in his role as husband and father. He was clearly devoted to his family and committed to his children. And I do remember in many of our meetings and consultations during the course of our official duties that he would speak most lovingly of his spouse, Dr. Jean, and of his children, Mark and Maxine. So to former First Lady Jean Ramjan Richards, on behalf of the opposition, on my own behalf, I wish to say that our thoughts and prayers are with you and your family at this time. We hope that you will find some comfort in the knowledge that your late husband was so well loved throughout Trinidad and Tobago. To his children, Mark and Maxine, we send our heartfelt condolences. The life of former President George Maxwell Richards, at 86 years old at the time of his passing, really is a remarkable list of personal achievements as well as those in public service. From 1950 to 1951, he worked for the United British Oilfields of Trinidad, the precursor company to Shell Trinidad Limited at Point Fortin. He received a scholarship from that company to study chemical engineering. He then attended the University of Manchester, where he undertook a Bachelor of Engineering degree and a Master of Engineering degree, and subsequently obtained a PhD in chemical engineering from the University of Cambridge. So in his academic work, he excelled. When he returned home, he worked for Shell from 57 to 65 before joining the Department of Chemical Engineering at UWI, where he served as senior lecturer, head of department, then dean of the Faculty of Engineering. He later became deputy principal, acting principal, pro-vice chancellor, and principal in 1985. Professor Richards has been hailed as one of the pioneers who built the Department of Chemical Engineering, establishing strong links with the Institution of Chemical Engineers, and ensuring that the department's programs were internationally accredited. He retired as principal in 1996, but he continued to lecture at the university. He was most instrumental in developing UWI's biggest annual fundraising event, and which I understand that he had planned to attend this weekend, the UWI Fed. The funds that have been raised over the years from this event for UWI Development and Endowment Fund have helped thousands of students over the years with funding for their studies at the institution. He also served on the board of several companies, including Trintop, now Petrotrin, National Gas, and the Trinidad Publishing Company. And of course, for a decade, he served as the 4th president of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, serving 2 consecutive terms. Today, madam, we honor this exemplary man who served our country with pride and dignity, who has left a distinctive legacy to be emulated. I have always admired Professor Richards for his dedication to the development of young people through his work at the university, and we share the belief that it's through education that people have a greater chance at improving their lives and lifting themselves out of poverty. In 1988, a year filled with adversity in Trinidad and Tobago, the government had slashed the university's funding by 20% and instituted taxes to students, which saw increases in tuition expenses. Professor Richards, then principal of the university, ensured that the students were well taken care of. He helped to weather that storm. For myself, on a personal level, my first interaction with the former president, was in 1986 at my graduation from the Hugh Wooding Law School. At that function, I was a valedictorian in the ceremony. Professor Richards, who was in the audience and listened to my speech, came up to me at the end of it, of course congratulated me, but more important, he told me that I would go far and achieve much in my lifetime. I was moved and inspired by this gesture, this being the first time that I'd met him, and it was one of the many inspiring moments that defined my life and motivated me to work towards achieving my goals. And I'm certain that many people over the years can relate a similar story and describe the positive impact Professor Richards had on their own development path. As president, Professor Richards presided over many firsts, including my appointment as the country's first female opposition leader and thereafter as the first female prime minister. I first dealt with President in the political arena in 2006, a contentious time for our party then. As a result of issues surrounding the then leader of the opposition, on the 25th of April 2006, President Richards declared that post vacant, and then thereafter, I received the support of the opposition MPs. President Richards gave me my instrument the first time as opposition leader on April 26, 2006. Thereafter, on February 24, 2010, at President's House, again I had interaction with President Richards when he handed me my instrument, again as opposition leader. On the 26th of May, following the victory at the polls, President Richards again signed my instrument of appointment when I was sworn in as Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. For the remainder of his term as head of state until 2013, I worked with President Richards as Prime Minister within the constitutional remits, and we maintained regular communication, always mindful of the important constitutional role and functions of the President in ensuring good governance and protecting our democracy. On a personal level, I valued his candor as well as his very sage advice during this period. Recently, I was reminded that the former President was a strong advocate for increased participation by women in leadership roles. In an interview in 2008, he indicated that he would support a woman president. He said at that time, and I quote, "The genetic makeup of women makes them better politicians. They tend to be less confrontational, more inclined to look for solutions." As we are just days away from the election of our nation's 6th president, and it is interesting, it's on the very day that we signed the nomination form, co-signed the nomination form, is that day that the president passed away. But given his sentiments, just days away from the election of our 6th president, I think he would have been pleased to see the election of a woman to this country's highest office, that of the president. Professor Richards' passing is indeed a great loss for our country, but I'm sure he will stand as an inspiration to young people and to future generations. Let us remember him, and let us honor his legacy of excellence and service to his country. May his soul rest in eternal peace. I thank you, Madam.
Honorable members, I join with members to pay tribute to Professor George Maxwell Richards, TC, CMTT, PhD, and former President of our Republic. As an outstanding statesman and patron of the arts, Professor Richards served Trinidad and Tobago with distinction for over 60 years in various capacities in the fields of energy, oil and gas, and academia. He rose through the ranks of the University of the West Indies, pioneering the development of the Department of Chemical Engineering with a focus on process industries, and provided his expertise to several companies and institutions. He later served as Pro-Vice Chancellor and Principal of the university. In his role as head of state, Professor Richards provided sound advice in his speeches made at the ceremonial openings of Parliament, advice which is as relevant today as when delivered. He reminded us of the importance of innovation, productivity, and competitiveness, as well as the need for effective cooperation and of the interdependence of the benches of and the various interests represented in the Parliament. Honorable members, today we remember Professor Richards not only as our fourth President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, but as a father, husband, brother, colleague, friend, mentor, and servant of our twin island republic. From the tributes paid in this chamber and in other arenas, Professor Richards has left a legacy of service to his nation and one of humility. In borrowing the words of a certain evangelist, that, and I quote, "The measure of a man is not in the number of servants he has, but the number of people he serves." It may be reasonable to conclude that a description of being a colossal man may well be befitting of Professor Richards. I take this opportunity to express my deepest condolences to the Richards family during this time of mourning, and I pray that the Almighty God grants them the comfort and strength needed in this time of bereavement. I now invite members to stand and observe a moment's silence as a mark of respect. May his soul rest in peace. Honorable members, I have directed the Clerk of the House to convey our condolences in writing to the wife and family of the late Professor George Maxwell Richards.
Bills brought from the Senate, petitions, papers.
The Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have the honor to lay the following papers. The audited financial statements of the Education Facilities Company Limited for the financial year ended September 30th, 2014. The audited financial statements of the National Quarries Company Limited for the years ended September 30th, 2010 and 2011. The audited financial statements of the Trinidad and Tobago Tourism Business Development Limited for the year ended December 31st, 2016. The annual report of the Financial Intelligence Unit of Trinidad and Tobago for the year ended September 30th, 2017. The report of the Central Bank of Trinidad and Tobago on insurance and pensions for the year ended December 31st, 2015. I beg to move that papers 1 to 4 be referred to the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee.
Honorable members, the question is that papers 1 to 4 be referred to the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it. The Leader of the House.
Thank you very kindly, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I have the honor to lay the following papers. Paper number 7, the ministerial response of the Ministry of National Security to the 5th report of the Joint Select Committee on Human Rights, Equality and Diversity on the examination of the human rights of remandees at remand prisons. Paper number 8, the ministerial response of the Ministry of Sport and Youth Affairs to the 2nd report of the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee on an examination of the report of the Auditor General of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago on a special audit of the operations of the Sports Company of Trinidad and Tobago, with particular reference to the development and upgrading of sporting facilities in Trinidad. Paper number 9, the ministerial response of the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development to the 5th report of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee on an examination into the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, with specific reference to accountability and transparency, inventory control, internal audit, subhead 02, goods and services, subhead 03, minor equipment purchases, subhead 09, development program, consolidated fund, and infrastructure development fund. Thank you very kindly, Madam Speaker.
The Minister of Housing and Urban Development.
Madam Speaker, I have the honor to lay the Trinidad and Tobago Housing Development Corporation vesting amendment to the first schedule number 6 order 2017.
The Attorney General.
Madam Speaker, I have the honor to lay the annual report of the Legal Aid and Advisory Authority for the years 2012-2013.
The Minister of Public Administration and Communications.
Madam Speaker, on behalf of the Minister of Public Administration and Communications, I have the honor to lay paper number 12, the administrative report of the National Library and Information System Authority for the fiscal year 2015 to 2016. Thank you very kindly, Madam Speaker.
The Minister of Community Development, Culture and the Arts.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I have the honor to lay the following paper: the additional information relating to the administrative report of the former Ministry of Arts and Multiculturalism for the period 2014-15. Thank you very kindly, Madam Speaker.
The Minister of Energy and Energy Industries.
Madam Speaker, on behalf of the Minister of Energy and Energy Industries, I have the honor to lay paper number 14, the Petroleum Amendment Regulations 2017. Thank you very kindly, Madam Speaker.
Reports from committees.
Member for Tobago East.
Madam Speaker, I have the honor to present the following reports. The 7th report of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee on an examination into the Ministry of Sport and Youth Affairs, with specific reference to follow-up to the 1st report of the Public Administration and Appropriation Committee on current expenditure related to official travel to Tobago. The 8th report of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee on an examination into the Ministry of Education, with specific reference to accountability and transparency, inventory control, internal audit, subhead 02, goods and services, subhead 03, minor equipment purchases, subhead 04, current transfers and subsidies, subhead 09, development program, consolidated fund, and infrastructure development fund. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Prime Minister's questions, urgent questions.
The member for Urupuch East.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. To the Minister of Energy and Energy Industries, can the Minister indicate whether or not the fake oil scandal, which resulted in 2 completed investigative reports, has been referred to the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service?
Minister of Energy and Energy Industries.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, as is now public knowledge, this whole issue of the oil discrepancies at Petrotrin came to the fore coming out of a Petrotrin's internal audit report. Subsequent to that, the Board of Petrotrin commissioned 2 international experts to further investigate this matter. One was by the coal company, which dealt particularly with the measurement system. And secondly, Gaffney Klein and Associates, that dealt with the reservoir and petroleum engineering matters. With specific reference to the question, the matter referred to in this question has not been referred to the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. However, I've been informed by the Board of Petrotrin that this said matter was referred in November of 2017 to the DPP for advice.
Member for Orpuchi, supplemental.
Thank you very much, Minister. Could the Minister state, to his knowledge, what attempts have been made to follow the real money siphoned out through the scheme and returned to the people of Trinidad and Tobago?
Minister of Energy and Energy Industry.
The Minister of Energy nor the Board of Petrotrin has no such authority to follow the money. We did what the board felt was proper to refer to the matter to the DPP for advice.
Supplemental, member for Orpuchis.
Thank you very much. Could the Minister indicate whether or not an alleged key player in this, Mr. Vidya Devki Singh, is still employed at Petrotrin?
Minister of Energy and Energy Industries.
The answer to that is in the affirmative, because he is under investigations at Petrotrin, and Petrotrin has very robust and well-written procedure as to how these investigations takes place, and that process is ongoing.
Member for Naparimo.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Given the recent attempted murder-suicide, among others, of Drupati and Sankar by her ex-husband, what plans are in place to ensure that restraining orders are better enforced to more effectively protect vulnerable women of our country?
Minister of National Security.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the Commissioner of Police has advised that the Domestic Violence Investigative and Procedural Manual was developed for police officers by a committee appointed by the then Attorney General in 2003. This manual is continually updated. The manual guides police officers in the approach to be taken in dealing with domestic violence and enforcement of protection orders. The Trinidad and Tobago Police Service continue to train its officers in the implementation of the procedures outlined in the manual. Training takes place at the divisional level and at the Trinidad and Tobago Police Academy. The organization will continue to train officers and monitor the enforcement of the said procedures in handling domestic violence cases, which include dealing with protection order. Madam Speaker, there is also a role for the community, and also for priests, counselors, and those who interact with those victims to ensure that information that they may gather in their procedure comes to the police attention as quickly as possible so the necessary action can be taken. Madam Speaker.
Member for Point of Peer.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the Minister of Works and Transport, based on recent reports which stated that the ministry was scheduled to begin road works on the 6th Company Road in New Grand Village, after residents had undertaken protest action for the second time in 1 week to highlight its deplorable condition, can the Minister state if it's the policy of the ministry to only undertake repairs to roads which are in dire need of attention after protest action has been taken by citizens?
Minister of Works and Transport.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I wish to inform this Honourable House that the Ministry of Works and Transport has a process for the addressing of urgent road repairs, which does not include protest action. Madam Speaker, the Ministry understands the plight of the citizens when hardship of this nature occurs. However, it at times results in badly needed resources having to be utilized to clean up the affected areas prior to work being able to start. I also wish to add, Madam Speaker, that we are not, the Ministry of Works do not encourage or start protests in any area in Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you.
Member for Point of Peer.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the Minister of Energy and Energy Industries, based on recent reports which stated that the Oilfield Workers Trade Union has warned government against retrenchment of workers in its planned restructuring of Petrotrin, can the Minister state if there would be any job losses at Petrotrin as a result of its restructuring plans at the state-owned oil company?
Minister of Energy and Energy Industries.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, on June the 1st, 2017, the now famous Lashley report was submitted to the government of Trinidad and Tobago. This report recommended, inter alia, that Petrotrin be restructured into 3 business units: Trinma, exploration and production land, and refining and marketing. Subsequent to this, on the 4th of September 2017, a new board was appointed under the chairmanship of Mr. Wilfred S. Spinney. They have been doing extensive and thorough investigation of the issues that face Petrotrin, which involve, inter alia, the restructuring of Petrotrin. And let me just add that Petrotrin's issues are not only related to the restructuring exercise. This process is ongoing. An extensive consultation will have to be held with all stakeholders, and in particular, I must say, the Oilfield Workers Trade Union. No final position of the nature of the restructuring has been taken at this time. In that context, it is premature to state whether the restructuring, which will come, will involve any reduction in the workforce.
Supplemental, member for point of order.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the Minister, could the Minister state when he feels that restructuring will take place?
Minister of Energy and
Well,
Energy.
based on the challenges Petrotrin face, we're looking, we should say, in the shortest order. But the shortest order has processes to follow. And what we want to do is make sure that we lay out what the options are, especially to the stakeholders. So when we take the decisions that we have to take, it will have the buy-in of all the stakeholders.
Member for Naparima.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would the Minister tell us whether the report that has been submitted to the board and is being reviewed by the ministry, whether it recommends retrenchment?
Minister of Energy and Energy Industries.
I do not know of which report you speak outside of the Lashley report.
Well, yes. Speaking about the Lashley report.
The question has been answered. Member for point of order.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the Minister of Finance, based on recent reports to the effect that the government has recently purchased a new passenger ferry, which is expected to arrive in Trinidad and Tobago in 2 months to service the sea bridge, can the Minister provide this House with information relating to the final cost of the ferry, its age, and its passenger and cargo capacity?
Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the purchase price of the vessel in question is $17.4 million. The vessel is brand new. It has never been used. It can accommodate 700 passengers and 100 vehicles. It is not a cargo vessel, as the question implies. It is a passenger vehicle ferry. By way of example, in 2006, the government purchased the Trinidad and Tobago Express vessel at a cost of US $20 million. The vessel at the time was 10 years old. And 1 year later, in 2007, the government purchased the T&T Spirit vessel for the price of US $60 million. At the time, the vessel was 3 years old. I wish to repeat the cost of this vessel, $17.4 million US. It is brand new. It has never been used. It can accommodate 700 passengers and 100 vehicles.
Supplemental, member for point of order.
Madam Speaker, supplementary Minister of Finance. I know he says it's brand new, but could he state the age of the vessel, when it was built? When it was built?
To that.
The vessel is currently in the snagging phase, which is a phase at the end of the construction of a new build vessel. And the snagging phase for a vessel is similar to the snagging phase for any bit of plant and machinery or a building for that matter, where minor matters are sorted out. But the vessel construction has been completed, but it has not been put into service. It has never been used by anyone, and therefore it is brand new, age zero. Age zero.
Supplementary question, member for Urupuchis.
Very much. Bearing in mind the answer given a few moments ago, could the minister indicate, given that this is brand new, not hit water yet, could the minister indicate what was the procurement process used by the government to secure this vessel, which is still in the construction phase?
Minister of Finance.
Madam Speaker, let me correct some of the misinformation put into the record by the member for Oropouche East. I never said it didn't hit the water. The vessel has been subjected to extensive sea trials in the water. And that is what has happened over the last month. The vessel was identified by way of a worldwide search using international experts, and the vessel has been procured by the National Infrastructure Development Company.
Standard procurement.
Questions on notice? Questions for oral answer?
Leader of the House.
Thank you very kindly, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, there are 11 questions for oral answer. We will be answering 10 of these questions, and we're asking for question number 58 to be deferred. Madam Speaker, with regard to the written questions, we are asking for all of these questions, the answers to all of these questions, to be deferred. Thank you very kindly, Madam Speaker.
In respect to the written questions, all these questions, which are 6 questions, were due since the 9th of December. It was due on that time, and now the leader of government we are now the 12th of January, and I don't know how long is it being deferred for.
So is it that you're saying that you no longer want them answered?
No.
Okay. Member for Princess Town.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. On behalf of the member for Princess Town, question number 52 to the Minister of Education.
Minister of Education.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. The reconstruction of the Princestown Presbyterian No. 1 Primary School is not programmed for the current fiscal year. However, the Ministry of Education will request an allocation for this project in the estimates of expenditure for fiscal year 2018-2019. Thank you.
Member for Princess Town.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. On behalf of the member for Princess Town, question number 53 to the Minister of Community Development, Culture and the Arts.
Ministry of Community Development, Culture and the Arts.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The National Commission for Self-Help has indicated receipt of no application for grants by flood-affected citizens during September to November 2017.
Member for Princess Town.
Again, Madam Speaker, on behalf of the member for Princess Town, question number 54, again to the Minister of Community Development, Culture and the Arts.
Minister of Community Development, Culture and the Arts.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The audit commissioned by the Ministry of Community Development, Culture and the Arts into Tobago has been completed.
Supplemental question.
To the Minister, supplemental. What is the next step with that forensic report, Madam Minister?
Minister of Community Development, Culture and the Arts.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The report is being considered by the ministry and by the relevant other ministries that have to consider it at this time.
Member for Kabuto Manzanilla.
Thank you. Thank you. Just to ask if that report will be made public at all, please.
Minister of Community Development, Culture and the Arts.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. After consideration of the report, if there's any portion of it that should be made public, it will be done so.
Member for Naparima.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Question number 56 to the Minister of National Security.
Minister of National Security.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the Ministry of National Security is in the process of investigating reports that citizens of Trinidad and Tobago are currently being held at an Iraqi detention camp.
Supplemental, Member for Naparima.
Madam Speaker, in view of the fact that the Iraqi government has said that they're interested in repatriating these citizens, and they are citizens of Trinidad and Tobago in Iraqi camps, have you at all sought to interact and to repatriate our citizens?
Minister of National Security.
Madam Speaker, the government of Trinidad and Tobago, through diplomatic channels and other agencies, are investigating Trinidad and Tobago citizens in the Iraqi detention center right now.
Supplemental, Member for Naparima.
Tell us, how many citizens of Trinidad and Tobago are detained, if they are detained, and what is the status? Have we interacted or have they said no?
Minister of National Security.
Madam Speaker, I will say again, the government of Trinidad and Tobago, through diplomatic channels and other channels, are investigating to confirm Trinidad and Tobago citizens in a detention camp in Iraq. Whether they are there or not. That's right.
Question 57, Member for Naparima.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Question 57 to the Minister of National Security.
Minister of National Security.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, at present, consideration is only being given, according to the Commissioner of Police, by the police officers in the execution of their duties of non-lethal weapons, devices, such as stun guns, in keeping with the current use of force policy of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. Madam Speaker, it should be noted that there is currently no legislative framework for the use of non-lethal forms of weapons, devices by civilians in Trinidad and Tobago. Accordingly, if there is a policy change in the future, amendments would have to be made to the Prevention of Crimes Offensive Weapons Act, Chapter 1109, and the Firearms Act, Chapter 1601, to allow this to happen, Madam Speaker.
Supplemental, no. Member for Urupuch West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. On behalf of the member for Urupuch West, question number 61 to the Minister of National Security.
Minister of National Security.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the government of Trinidad and Tobago is aware of the presence of illegal migrants in Trinidad and Tobago. Based on the ministry's record, a total of 409,123 nationals of other countries arrived in the country legally during the period of January 1st to November 30th, 2017. Of this total, 14,178 non-nationals overstayed their time and had not yet departed as at November 30th, 2017. Information received from the counter-trafficking unit indicates that for the period January 1st to December 31st, 2017, a total of 4 persons were reported as smuggled into Trinidad and Tobago from Venezuela. These victims include 2 adults and 2 minors. Additionally, there were no reports of smuggled persons by the counter-trafficking unit for the period 2014 to 2016. The counter-trafficking unit was set up and became functional in 2013, Madam Speaker. Information also received from the CTU indicates that 3 Colombian females were reported to have been smuggled into Trinidad and Tobago in that same year. It should be noted, Madam Speaker, that the Trinidad and Tobago government has instituted a number of measures in collaboration with other arms of national security and other relevant government agencies to treat illegal migrants. Such measures are aimed at strengthening its border management and control capacity to safeguard the country against the entry of illegal persons. The key agencies under the Ministry of National Security with responsibility for border management are the Immigration Division and the Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force, in particular the Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard. The Immigration Division continues to promote national security by effectively monitoring and controlling the movement of persons into, within, and out of the country. To this end, the division pursues a border policy that focuses on the entry into and exit from Trinidad and Tobago of travelers who meet entry requirements, as well as identification and management of the risk to Trinidad and Tobago arising from those travelers who do not meet entry requirements. Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard also plays a significant role in safeguarding our borders against illegal migrants. Additionally, the utilization of the National Coastal Surveillance Radar Center has provided Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard with the capacity to continuously monitor Trinidad and Tobago's territorial waters, as well as the ability to identify vessels of interest for interception. It is also instructive to note, Madam Speaker, that other mechanisms are being used by the Ministry of National Security to treat with illegal immigrants who may or may not be smuggled into the country as victims of human trafficking. Bilingual signage has been developed and is evident at the Piaco International Airports and other ports of entry. Public service announcements have been developed and are already being promoted on social media. Lastly, there are plans to develop and launch a border campaign to target migrants at legal and illegal port of entry. Further to these measures, Madam Speaker, identified above, the Trinidad government has also initiated the following measures. A memorandum of intent between Trinidad and Tobago and the United States signed in April 2017 to provide for the establishment of a personal identification secure comparison evaluation system, which would be used together with our border management system to identify travelers coming into and leaving Trinidad and Tobago. There is also ongoing Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force joint operations along the south coast from Guayagüari to Icacos, maritime patrols by the Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard, mobile patrols by the Trinidad and Tobago Regiment together with the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service in our rural areas, continuous patrolling in our maritime domain and aerial domain by the Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard and the Air Guard respectively. There's also joint mobile patrols with the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service in areas such as Matura, Matlat, Manzalina, Guayagüari, Blanchisez, and a number of the coastal areas to prevent, to act as a deterrent to those who enter our country illegally, Madam Speaker.
Member, supplemental question from Member for Chaguanas East.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Will the Honourable Minister indicate the countries of origin for the number of persons you quoted as being illegal immigrants for the period?
Minister of National Security.
Madam Speaker, there are several countries of origin. I do not have information, but can be provided.
Supplemental Member for Chaguanas East.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Will the Minister indicate to us of all those strategies that you're going to be using to have surveillance over the various areas of entry, do you have the adequate manpower and technical resources to so do?
Minister of National Security.
Madam Speaker, there's always room for improvement, and we continue to adjust and improve as we go along.
Member for Naparima.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Given the pervasiveness in our communities and our streets of people who are speaking Spanish and not Trinidad English, is the Minister satisfied with the monitoring mechanisms to detect and repatriate illegal immigrants?
Minister of National Security.
Madam Speaker, the Trinidad and Tobago government through the Ministry of National Security, in particular the Immigration Division, continue to be vigilant and look at individuals who come to this country illegally, who have overstayed their time, and continue to make such arrests. And there are a number of people who, in fact, are the Immigration Detention Center who have broken the law in those respects. So we continue to be vigilant and we continue to treat with them as and when the actions are taken, Madam Speaker.
Member for Oropouche West, question 62.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. On behalf of the member for Oropouche West, question number 62 to the Minister of Education.
Minister of Education.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Ministry of Education has developed a national strategy for addressing student indiscipline in schools, and this initiative incorporates actions to address the issue of bullying in schools. The national strategy uses a data-driven approach to ensure relevance and involves the establishment of discipline committees at schools, education districts, and at head office, together with the development of appropriate school discipline plans. Implementation of the school discipline plan engages interdivisional committees operating at the levels of head office, education districts, and the schools. The school discipline committee is responsible for the development of an evidence-based school discipline plan specific to the needs of the particular school. The approach incorporates the following: targeted interventions by the Student Support Services Division at the individual, group, and whole school levels. Enhanced supervision of students during teaching and non-teaching times, including identifying and monitoring hotspots at schools. Implementation of a modified curriculum that ensures that all students are meaningfully engaged in activities that foster their holistic development both in and out of the classroom. The establishment of core and extracurricular activities that cater to the interests of all students and to incorporate such into the class timetable and after-school activities. Creation of parent-stakeholder school ownership by building relationships and embracing activities from other ministries and NGOs, for example, police youth clubs and anti-bullying programs. Promotion of student involvement in leadership roles, for example, student councils and/or prefect systems. Students must also accept their responsibility in creating the desired school culture. Establishment of school committees that require staff and the student membership so that all can experience an increased sense of belonging and/or ownership of the school. Development of a discipline matrix outlining a progressive approach for treating with acts of indiscipline based on levels of severity, and the development of a positive reinforcement procedure which focuses on rewarding desired behavior displayed by students and serves to promote the recurrence of the same. This involves a tangible and intangible reward system. Thank you.
Supplementary question, Member for Chaguanas East.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Can the Minister indicate to us how many secondary schools are currently without an effective discipline committee?
Minister of Education.
Madam Speaker, the information that is available to me would indicate that all secondary schools are in possession of this discipline matrix and this discipline plan. Thank you.
Member for Point-a-Pear.
Supplemental, Madam Speaker, through you to the Minister of Education. He mentioned in his dissertation the monitoring of hotspots at schools. Could he explain what he means by that?
Minister of Education.
Madam Speaker, in some areas, in some of our schools, because of breaches to the fence, for example, we designate those areas as hotspots. There are other areas that are far removed from the administrative center of the school. We also designate those areas as hotspot areas. Thank you.
Member for Chaguanas East, supplemental.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Can the Minister indicate how many such schools are designated as hotspots?
Minister of Education.
Madam Speaker, that information is not readily available.
Member for Couva South.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. On behalf of the member for Couva South and the Minister of Finance, question number 64.
Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The 9th Actuarial Review report of the National Insurance System was laid in Parliament in November 2015. In July 2016, legislative amendments were assented to which allowed the National Insurance Board of Trinidad and Tobago to implement the two most important short-term recommendations of the 9th Actuarial Review in September 2016, which were an increase of the contribution rates from 12% to 13.2%, and an increase in the maximum insurance earnings from $12,000 to $13,600. Both recommendations were implemented with the immediate impact of increasing the revenues of the National Insurance Board. However, Although these changes positively impacted the National Insurance Board in the short term, recent macroeconomic events have, to some extent, negatively impacted the National Insurance Board and reduced these gains. Long-term reform is therefore urgently needed to ensure NIS sustainability. The adjustments proposed by the NIB's actuaries through the 9th actuarial review include future contribution rate increases, restraint in future benefit increases, and an increase in the retirement age from age 60 to age 65. These major reforms require considerable public sensitization, public acceptance, and national dialogue if they are to be successfully implemented. No decision has been taken on these matters to date. However, the National Insurance Board has taken proactive steps to initiate discussions and consultations on these critical long-term reform measures. This is evident by the numerous stakeholder consultations, seminars, newspaper articles, radio interviews, and television appearances by representatives of the National Insurance Board since October 2015. In addition to the ongoing dialogue with respect to reform, the NIB has also directed its efforts towards improving aspects of its operations with the aim of controlling costs and bolstering its revenues from contributions and investment income. As it relates to cost, the National Insurance Board of Trinidad and Tobago has maintained one of the lowest ratios of administrative expenditure to contribution income of social insurance systems in the English-speaking Caribbean, 5.3% for financial year 2016, well within the established limit of 7.5%. The organization continues to review processes and technology to further reduce this ratio. Regarding contributions, the National Insurance Board has reviewed its compliance structure to better monitor employers' obligation under the National Insurance Act to remit to the NIB the requisite contribution for the workers they employ. To ensure optimal performance of the investment fund, the National Insurance Board continues to explore strategies which provide high-risk adjusted yield while ensuring that adequate liquidity is provided for the payment of benefits. The National Insurance Board is considering increasing the overseas investment limit as one possible way to bolster and improve its investment fund performance.
Member for Naparima.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, question 65 is essentially the same as question 61. It will evoke the same response and is therefore being withdrawn.
Thank you. Member for Barataria Sanwa.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. On behalf of the member for Barataria San Juan, question number 66 to the Minister of Public Utilities.
Minister of Public Utilities.
Madam Speaker, on behalf of the Minister of Public Utilities, with the exception of Canada, the Trinidad and Tobago Postal Service Limited continues to provide registered mail service both locally and internationally. With respect to Canada, the Canadian Postal Administration had, in August 2016, indicated that it would no longer be providing tracking information for inbound registered mail coming into Canada from other countries. As a result of this decision, postal administrations in many countries worldwide, including Trinidad and Tobago, have ceased accepting registered mail for delivery to Canada. Excuse me. Prior to the discontinuation of its outbound registered mail service to Canada, TT Post had duly notified the public of its intention to discontinue this service commencing in August 2016 through notices published in the daily newspapers, that is to say the Express, Guardian, and Newsday, and its website, and displayed at its post offices and retail outlets throughout Trinidad and Tobago that information. Madam Speaker, TT Post does not have the infrastructure and logistical support services, that is to say, mechanisms, warehouses, people and resources, sea, air, or land required to competitively provide international courier services on its own. As such, the company has engaged in partnership arrangements with international courier firms to provide this service to its customers. The present arrangement in place with DHL commenced in November 2016 under the brand name Hummingbird Express. Prior to this, TT Post partnered with TNT Express to provide this service. Under the present arrangement with DHL, TT Post receives and prepares mail and documents for outbound service delivery to other countries, including Canada, while DHL provides what is called the final mile service. That is to say, delivery from Trinidad and Tobago to the final destination abroad using its integrated logistics services. This allows it to coordinate and provide international express delivery service from door-to-door destinations worldwide. DHL provides its international courier service to TT Post at a discounted price, which allows TT Post to place a markup on the transaction and earn income whilst still being competitive with other service providers. Thank you very kindly for the question.
Request for leave to move the adjournment of the House on definite matters of urgent public importance, statements by ministers, personal explanations, introduction of bills, motions related to the business or sittings of the House and moved by a minister, public business, government business, bills second reading.
Honorable members, the debate on the second reading of the following bill, which was in progress when the House adjourned on Friday, December 15, 2017, will be resumed. A bill entitled, An Act to Amend the Mutual Assistance in Criminal Matters Act, the Proceeds of Crime Act, the Financial Intelligence Unit of Trinidad and Tobago Act, the Customs and Exchange Control Act. Minister of National Security.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, thank you very much for giving the opportunity to contribute to this bill, an act to amend the Mutual Assistance in Criminal Matters, the Proceeds of Crime Act, the Financial Intelligence Unit of Trinidad and Tobago Act, Customs Act, and the Exchange Control Act. Madam Speaker, let me first of all congratulate the Attorney General for once again bringing to this House his strong legislative agenda to deal with issues pertinent to criminal matters in Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, this bill is evidence that this government's commitment to this country that we shall operate in greater compliance with international standards. And one of the gains of a more robust anti-money laundering, combating the finances of terrorism framework is an environment that will attract new or sustained levels of foreign investment in this country. Madam Speaker, when we look at the essentials of the bill, it speaks to treating with several matters put together in an omnibus fashion. The sole purpose to tie together all the proposed enactments and thereby renders the bill very much intelligible for parliamentary procedures and for purposes, to bring together in a single bill all the legislative amendments resulting from policy decision to facilitate parliamentary debate. Madam Speaker, let me put some context into the bill before us as it treats with mutual assistance in criminal matters. Madam Speaker, today we live in a world of interdependence, a world in which most countries, most entities rarely can attune to the matters that confront them in the security environment by themselves. And so the relationship between states are very important, as most of the issues and challenges are common in most of the jurisdictions from one country to the next. Madam Speaker, as criminals evolve their techniques and modus operandi of wreaking havoc on populations, so too must states make the necessary concomitant changes to their administrative and legal infrastructures if they are to effectively eliminate these elements and threats from our various societies. It is in this vein that the government of Trinidad and Tobago is moving to amend these various pieces of legislation to treat with issues across our international security environment. Madam Speaker, this government, at page 6 of our 2015 manifesto, which subsequently became government policy, underscored that violent crime is out of control while white-collar crimes, especially money laundering, bribery, corruption, and theft from the people's purse, has reached epidemic levels. Page 16 of that very document also recognized the need for greater emphasis in the Foreign Service for diplomacy of security and terrorism. It is not this government's intention to allow the financial system to become the lifeblood of crime in Trinidad and Tobago, Madam Speaker. It was clear, even from the outside looking in, that the prevention of financial crimes, improvement of operational efficiency, and the pursuit of criminals and their assets had to become critical goals for this administration. Madam Speaker, when we were subsequently installed in the office, 7 months had already elapsed subsequent to the Caribbean Financial Action Task Force completion of its on-site assessment of Trinidad and Tobago AML CFT measures in accordance with the Financial Action Task Force recommendations and methodologies. We are faced with and sobered by a grim reality, Madam Speaker, even in advance of the publication of the report. For notwithstanding the progress made over the years, there remain some serious vulnerabilities which we had to address. And while my colleague, the Attorney General, have already provided details on Trinidad and Tobago's ratings in the 2016 CFATIF report and the CFATIF and FATIF consequences, so there is no need for me to repeat them. However, Madam Speaker, I will underscore that Trinidad and Tobago is required to work closely with FATIF and CFATIF to implement an action plan that targets 7 of the 11 immediate outcomes, namely, Madam Speaker, international cooperation, legal persons and arrangements, money laundering, investigations and prosecution, confiscation, terrorist financing, investigations and prosecutions, terrorist finances, preventative measures and financial sanctions, proliferations of weapons of mass destruction, and financing. Madam Speaker, this administration promised to reestablish a reputation for transparency, as well as create a culture where decisions are made and actions taken by the government in the best interest of our country's development. Our efforts have not been self-serving. We have therefore spoken candidly, prior to and since the publication of the Mutual Evaluation Report, about the deficiencies of our AML CFT framework. After a careful analysis of the matters that hamper our progress and the recommendations to resolve all our differences, a phased, risk-based approach was adopted and is being implemented to allow us to take the profit out of crime, target criminal assets, protect our national financial system. The FATIF has provided a blueprint for every country to achieve compliance successfully with its international standards. As Trinidad and Tobago's point of contact with the CFATIF and in close collaboration with the Attorney General and Minister of Finance, Minister of National Security in charge with ensuring that the national AML CFT regime is in keeping with international standards. Technical support is given by the National Anti-Money Laundering and Counter-Financing Terrorism Committee, the NAMLAC as it is called, and the AML CFT Compliance Unit, both of which are established under the Ministry of National Security. Madam Speaker, at the cabinet level, our strategy has therefore been to innovate as well as support and sustain national and international efforts to establish effective measures to allow for a robust AML CFT framework. We work closely with the NAMLAC, other national entities, private sector stakeholders, and international partners as part of our strategy to achieve FATF 3 immediate outcomes, namely, Madam Speaker, policy coordination and cooperation, cooperation to mitigate the money laundering and financing of terrorism threats, proceeds of crimes, and funds in support of terrorism are prevented from entering the financial and other sectors or detected and reported by these sectors. Money laundering threats are detected and disrupted, and criminals are sanctioned and deprived with illicit proceeds. Further, Madam Speaker, terrorist financing threats are detected and disrupted. Terrorists are deprived of resources, and those who finance terrorism are sanctioned, thereby contributing to the prevention of terrorism acts. Madam Speaker, the government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago has not given lip service to its promise to prioritize white-collar crimes and invariably protect the financial system from abuse. Our ministerial efforts, the actions being taken by the NAMLAC, the sterling contributions of competent authorities within the public and private sectors, as well as international technical assistance, has allowed for risk mitigation strategies that are informed by inter alia national threat assessments, findings of the National Money Laundering and Financing of Terrorism Risk Assessment, the 2016 CFATF Mutual Evaluation Report, and other reports, compulsory examinations conducted by the supervisory authorities, best practices, papers and typologies. An AML CFT strategy for 2018-2020, Madam Speaker, is currently being finalized by the Ministry of National Security, and once approved by the NAMLAC, will be submitted to Cabinet for consideration. Madam Speaker, we also strengthen preventative measures which include updates to sector-specific AML CFT guidelines, enhance supervisory measures, and an increase in sector outreach and guidance, not just to supervised entities, but even within the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. The NAMLAC continuing to coordinate national AML CFT efforts and operate as a forum of consultations and collaboration among reporting and supervisory authorities. International cooperation, which on the basis of this bill in terms of mutual assistance, has been strengthened, allowing for an increase in the number of agreements signed by the Financial Intelligence Unit with other financial intelligence units to share information, or financial investigation branch of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service and the Central Authority in the Ministry of the Attorney General continue to assist our foreign partners and also capitalize on opportunities to obtain information from their counterparts. We have seen Trinidad and Tobago take a leading role in the ARIN CARB, which is an information network of experts and practitioners in the field of asset identification, freezing, seizure, management, and confiscation. Madam Speaker, legislative enhancement and policy development based on risk, as evidenced by the suite of criminal justice reform legislation, aimed at increasing the pace and strengthening procedures, anti-corruption strategies, and the overhaul of the procurement regime, continues apace. We have already, Madam Speaker, by way of order, amended the second schedule to the Proceeds of Crime Act, Chapter 1127, to include money laundering and offenses under the Gambling and Betting Act as categories of specified offenses. Policies currently under development or consideration that would lead to legislation include non-profit organizations, trust and proliferation financing. Additionally, Madam Speaker, amendments to the Companies Act are being finalized to allow for the collection and retention of accurate and up-to-date beneficial ownership information in the Register General's Department. By the development of civil forfeiture legislation, we are seeking a more viable and purposeful approach to confiscation, seizing, retraining, freezing, and forfeiting of assets, managing those assets and sharing those assets, Madam Speaker. The Minister of Finance is spearheading the efforts to treat the insurance and gambling sectors, and efforts are in train as it pertains to optimal regulations of credit union. Madam Speaker, officials have also benefited on several occasions from training and financial investigation with respect to AML and CFT measures. Counterterrorism, prisoner intelligence, tactical and strategic analysis, and combating cash smuggling was also on the agenda. There has been greater reliance, Madam Speaker, on financial intelligence from the FIU and greater use of special investigative tools by the restructured law enforcement working group. Interagency cooperation has been encouraged and, in fact, has improved, allowing for increase in parallel and joint investigations. There was also the merger of the Organized Crime, Narcotics and Firearms Bureau and the Criminal Gang and Intelligence Unit in a new unit called the Organized Crime Intelligence Unit, which again has a remit under the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service to treat with issues pertinent to our discussion. Further, Madam Speaker, the Strategic Services Agency's legislative remit has now expanded to allow for focus on all serious crime, which would include financial crimes. The Seized Asset Advisory Committee being established, as well as the settlement of the seized asset funds, including bank account, is also another measure treat with that will support measures adopted in this bill. Action being taken to fulfill our international obligations to implement targeted financial sanctions related to terrorism and its financing. The recent approval by the National Security Council of the National Counterterrorism Strategy again speaks volume to the government's effort in treating with issues that not only germane to Trinidad and Tobago, but across the international security environment. And so that National Security Policy and Strategy Implementation Plan is in fact in progress and will be finalized shortly. Madam Speaker, that National Security Counterterrorism Strategy allows us to interact at a certain level, at a very high level, the countries in the national security environment, because from policy to policy, we treated issues that are common across most jurisdictions. We also encourage collaboration between the Ministry of National Security, the United Nations Regional Center for Peace, Disarmament, and Development in Latin America and the Caribbean, commonly referred to as UN-LIREC, which allow for development of guidelines and recommendations on preventing proliferation financing specific to Trinidad and Tobago. The benefiting of Trinidad and Tobago from technical assistance from international partners on a myriad of issues such as financial investigation, as well as combating terrorism and extremism, continues apace. Trinidad and Tobago commitment to national and regional AML CFT reform, as evidenced by its efforts to rectify national deficiencies, the hosting of CFATF Secretariat, assignment of staff to assist CFATF Secretariat, and by its involvement in the various CFATF committees, are in fact measures that indicate the support of the government of Trinidad and Tobago. It is obvious, Madam Speaker, that we are exhibiting a strong and consistent political will to combat financial crimes. This government continues to demonstrate that by the various measures that I have articulated a while ago, so that we are not just talking, Madam Speaker, but we are acting as this government is prone to do. Madam Speaker, what we have recognized, however, is that there remain several gaps in the framework that can either be exploited by criminals or defeat the efforts of competent authorities to ensure that we effectively deter, investigate, prosecute, convict, and confiscate assets. As a responsible government, we intend to continue to operate in accordance with international best practices, and this is what this bill serves to do, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, my colleagues have already detailed the intended benefits, but please permit me to reiterate just a few of the salient points that target some of the weaklings I identified a while ago. Amendment to the Mutual Assistance in Criminal Matters Act, Chapter 1124. Each country, Madam Speaker, must have a legal basis that allows for the rapid provisions of the widest possible range of international cooperation and mutual assistance in financial and associated crimes, investigations, prosecution, and related proceedings. As I mentioned a while ago, Madam Speaker, and I repeat that we must understand the context in which we're dealing with, because when one looks at the international security environment, the challenges and issues that we face in Trinidad and Tobago are identical and similar in a number of areas to the challenges faced by countries throughout the world. And therefore, it's important in terms of treaties, in terms of assistance, that we work together in a cooperative and collaborative manner so that each country truly and certainly looks at the basis of sharing information and best practices. Madam Speaker, we've looked at one of the acts of the bill speaks to tax evasion and money laundering, and we've seen that, again, based on the Attorney General's articulation, it is one measure in which an amendment will correct as we go forward. This amendment, I believe, will allow for the central authority to share tax information in accordance with relevant guidelines. And so, therefore, we cannot understand that there will be any reservation whatsoever within this chamber that the law-abiding citizens would have to this provision, which can only serve to strengthen our investigative powers and relationship with our international partners. Madam Speaker, Despite several charges, we've known that there have been no money laundering prosecution to date. And one of the contributing factors, my apologies, in fact, there have been many money laundering prosecutions to date. In response, Madam Speaker, I know that the Attorney General, who has provided an overview of this legislation, continue to enforce, and therefore this bill before us is to give him further strength and further teeth or further powers to treat the issues with respect to money laundering and so on. Madam Speaker, we cannot be lenient when criminals seek to become rich of the spoils of others or manipulate systems that result in empty efforts. Financial crimes require complex planning and prevention, which would require strong financial controls and punishment that deters. We see these penalties as dissuasive and proportionate to the crime as well as the risks, but in any event, the penalties are maximum penalties, so judicial officers have the discretion to impose a lesser penalty if circumstances design. Crime must not pay, Madam Speaker, and therefore penalties must be dissuasive. And therefore, the measures and the amendment adopted in the bill will certainly act as a deterrent in terms of both at the summary and the indictable level. Madam Speaker, with respect to the Customs Act, Madam Speaker, the proposed more detailed provision of the Customs Act that now specifically excludes firearms, ammunition, bulletproof vests, and firearm accessories, inclusive of lasers, holsters, scopes, and tools for maintaining the firearm, being importable by non-holders of firearm user license, is also a positive step in the right direction. Madam Speaker, when we looked at the present security situation in Trinidad and Tobago, by example, when we look at the murder rate, we know that the guns are the weapons of choice. And therefore, the amendment suggested in the bill with respect to the Customs Act to include accessories related to firearms is in fact a positive step in the right direction. Refer to, Madam Speaker, bulletproof vests, laser lights, holsters, scopes, tools for maintaining a firearm. And therefore, tighter restraints and laws are required to ensure that these do not fall in the wrong hands. Because as we're aware, the bill does not seem to deter firearm users, but in fact, those who are bent on using it for illegal aims and illegal purposes. Madam Speaker, when one looks at, as of December 31st, 2017, the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service was able to remove off the streets of Trinidad and Tobago 1,064 firearms, almost 18,000 rounds of ammunition. We know that we are treating with, and therefore laws that are being put in place would certainly assist law enforcement, would certainly assist the customs, especially customs with respect to those type of items coming through freely through our ports of Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, on November the 17th, I want to also look at measures that we have been looking in terms of international cooperation. The Ministry of National Security, with an understanding of what happens in the security environment, continues to liaise with our international partners to look at best practices, but also to share information and set up certain structures and memorandums of intent, memorandums of understanding, again, along the lines of mutual assistance. And to that end, on November 7, 2017, Madam Speaker, the Minister of National Security hosted Lord Ahmad, the British Minister of State responsible for the United Nations and Commonwealth Affairs. One of the positive outcomes of this visit was the signature of a memorandum of understanding on a wide range of collaboration in security areas. A technical committee has commenced planning for the implementation of this MOU, which we intended to meet to assess progress later on this year. This heightened level of cooperation simply complements the assistance the British has been providing the Caribbean, to Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean as a whole, in a number of different areas. But, Madam Speaker, while we continue to cooperate, we need also to enforce these cooperation through legislative agenda. And hence the reason why the mutual assistance bill that we force today is important in strengthening those very relationships. During the week of December 18, 2017, the Ministry of National Security also met with the Ambassador of Mexico as we seek to enhance collaboration in that country, Madam Speaker. And with respect to Mexico, Madam Speaker, we re-established bilateral cooperation with Mexico, which in fact started since 2014 in what is called the Grupo de Alto Nivel de Seguridad, commonly referred to as GANSEC, which was established in 2014. We have recently re-established that bilateral cooperation with Mexico because we understand from our interaction that there are a number of things that we can learn from Mexico with respect to dealing with drugs, with respect to dealing with gangs, with respect to dealing with crimes. Madam Speaker, that bilateral cooperation focuses on immigration, on intelligence, international security and terrorism, drug trafficking and organized crime, public safety, customs, crime, violence, and social prevention. So both countries, Madam Speaker, in fact, working towards finalizing and shaping these as we review these entities. Madam Speaker, we also treated with Mexico with respect to disaster risk reduction because they too, as you understand, Mexico has been subjected to a number of natural disasters, earthquakes in particular, and so we are learning from them with respect to collaboration in terms of regional disaster or disaster in Trinidad and Tobago. The disaster risk, again, is another area in which we involve the Mexican with. Madam Speaker, in terms of international cooperation, we also have had some discussions with the Republic of China, People's Republic of China, in terms of military exchanges, in terms of military courses being offered, in terms of aviation, in terms of maritime security. Again, what I'm referring to here in support of the bill is that international cooperation with issues in crime and criminality is very important in today's world. So we continue to reach out as a country. We continue to treat with countries that have experiences that we can learn from. So in addition to Mexico, we also have some discussions. We've had discussions with the Republic of China. Madam Speaker, we've also had discussion with the Republic of Colombia. Again, we have re-established the bilateral cooperation with Colombia. In particular, Colombia, we've had a police cooperation agreement between the Ministry of National Defense of Colombia and the Ministry of National Security of Trinidad and Tobago, which in fact was signed in March 2006. But Madam Speaker, it was last for some time, and this government has re-established those because we believe that there is essential benefit in treating issues in Colombia. One would recall from a geographical standpoint that the Orinoco River starts in Colombia and some 17,000 kilometers ends up in the Gulf of Paria. So there's a connection between Trinidad and Tobago and Colombia. As a matter of fact, Madam Speaker, in the security environment, we sometimes say that whatever floats out of Colombia passes through Venezuela and ends up in the Gulf of Paria through the Orinoco Delta. So there's a connection there in terms of security. And therefore, not only that, but when one looks at the security environment in Colombia, again, there are similarities in what is happening there with respect to drugs, with respect to guns, with respect to illegal movements, ammunition, and so on, and even people to some extent that exist in our own security environment. So that we have reached out to Colombia to reestablish that bilateral cooperation, both in the law enforcement and also in the defense and security area. Madam Speaker, we've also looked at relationship between the Trinidad and Tobago and India with respect to, again, issues that are common to both of our countries. We have a proposal right now, Madam Speaker, to establish a Center of Excellence for Information Technology in Trinidad and Tobago based on discussions with my counterpart from India. The establishment of this mechanism would ensure secure transmission of electronic communications to mitigate against document leakage, as well as assisting law enforcement officials to address increasing incidents of cybercrime. Madam Speaker, the Indian Technical and Economic Cooperation Program, the ITEC, is a bilateral assistance program run by the Government of India and administered by the Ministry of External Affairs in India. But it also deals in particular with the Ministry of National Security. It covers a wide range of sectors such as information technology, personnel management, scientific areas, and also security. In this regard, Madam Speaker, a number of courses for consideration for security officials from the Government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago were proposed in such areas as cybercrime and network security, advanced information technology for law enforcement, fingerprinting, forensics, maritime surveillance and security, engineering for defense officers, and aviation. Madam Speaker, we continue to work with the Government of India, again, to explore best practices and to look at areas for collaboration and cooperation. Madam Speaker, we've also engaged Canada. Again, I mention these countries because the situation that confronts all our countries, whether regionally or otherwise, are similar. I want to emphasize that because it has a nexus to what we are treating in this bill in terms of mutual assistance across both Commonwealth and non-Commonwealth countries. Madam Speaker, Trinidad and Tobago has had a long dynamic relationship with Canada that began before Trinidad and Tobago's independence since 1962. In fact, since the establishment of formal bilateral security relations in 1974, Trinidad and Tobago has been the beneficiary of numerous grants and programs offered by the government of Canada and have entered into several agreements to advance the security interests of both countries. One of these agreements, Madam Speaker, is a memorandum of understanding between the Trinidad and Tobago government, and which is present and ongoing, and the Prison Service and the Correctional Service of Canada concerning the sharing of correctional information and expertise, which was signed in 2012. Again, this government has reestablished that bilateral cooperation with Canada, especially with respect to the prisons. And I dare say, Madam Speaker, for the benefit of the South and the public, that we have benefited tremendously in shaping and changing our prison system. In fact, even from the terminology of prisons, the correction, which speaks to restorative and rehabilitation as opposed to prison. So we are learning quite a lot from the Canadians, who in fact prepare to invest tremendously in Trinidad and Tobago to help us assist in moving and in shaping, even in infrastructure, but in terms of policy also, in our prison system in Trinidad and Tobago. But we also experience a number of training exposure to Canada through our military, law enforcement also. Our military has continued to benefit with exposure in the Canadian institutions, both the Army, the Air Guard, and the Navy. Training experience, even at the legal, in terms of setting up our own legal system, a military legal system. We continue to share in international cooperation and so on. Also in respect to intelligence. With respect to intelligence, our intelligence agencies continue to liaise with their counterpart in Canada, and of course, most of the countries I mentioned a while ago, to treat the issues again within crime and security environment. Madam Speaker, we have also reached out and has established contacts with the Netherlands. As you well know, the Netherlands has interest in the region, to Curaçao and the other Dutch Antilles countries. So therefore, there's a security nexus between Trinidad and Tobago and the Netherlands. And so we reached out to them also. We have recently had an invitation that visit at the very highest level in terms of information and intelligence sharing, where one of our senior officers attended such a conference in the Netherlands, again to establish the kind of contact.
Point 40, your original speaking time is now spent. You're entitled to 15 more minutes if you wish to avail yourself of it.
Thank you, Madam
Please
Speaker.
proceed.
Thank you, Madam. Yes, Madam Speaker, as I was saying, we've reached out to the Netherlands because we believe there's a common interest within the region. And next to that, we've also reached out to the French, who also have interest in the region. Because again, we share the same security space in the Caribbean. And therefore, issues are common to all of our countries. So that we have had, again, invitations and collaboration and discussion with the French and the Dutch with respect to sharing of information, looking at areas that common that they have treated with, experience, and it's mutually beneficial to all our countries, because there are some issues that we have dealt with that they have not been experienced to. And therefore, we share information, we share best practices that are mutually beneficial to all of our countries. With respect to France, Madam Speaker, we have looked at the whole question of information sharing, the whole question of intelligence sharing. There had, in fact, been a very high-powered meeting between the Director General of the Intelligence Department, Homeland Affairs, in France, and of course, the National Police Research Assistance, Interventions, and Deterrence Unit, together with our Director of the Special Strategic Services Agency and our National Intelligence Agency, at a very high level. Madam Speaker, that speaks to, again, literally mutual assistance, the sharing information, the treatment of issues that are common to both our jurisdictions, notwithstanding our wide geographical distance, as I said. The commonality lies with the French departments within our regions and the Netherlands, and so on. Madam Speaker, we also continue to work together with the United Kingdom and, of course, the United States of America, to which we have some very long-lasting relationships. We continue to share information. We continue to set up structures. As a matter of fact, Cabinet has just recently approved the United States of America as a designated country under the States of the Forces Act, Madam Speaker, so that there can be exchanges of personnel between both countries. Trinidad and Tobago personnel can, military personnel and law enforcement personnel can go to the United States and vice versa. So that, again, mutual assistance in the making, Madam Speaker, to a large extent. We have benefited quite tremendously from our interaction with the United States, both in the law enforcement environment and the security and defense environment. Madam Speaker, within recent time, we have had the benefit of the only Caribbean country to have stationed and joined Interagency Task Force South, Trinidad and Tobago. That has been very beneficial to us. As a matter of fact, I can say quite publicly that based on the present year, we were able to have one of the largest drug busts in Trinidad and Tobago, almost $800 and something million last year. And again, that's based on cooperation and collaboration. Right? That's based on collaboration and cooperation, based again on a relationship with the United States of America. We continue to benefit from training in a number of different areas. We continue to benefit from exchange of assets. We continue to benefit from a number of learnings, Madam Speaker, and exchanges, again, mutually. Notwithstanding our size, we also teach the United States a thing or two in our own environment. So it is beneficial to both of us. And again, linked to the bill in terms of mutual assistance, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we also continue our relationship with the United Kingdom, which again is long-lasting, through a number of training relationships, a number of exposure where we continue to develop our law enforcement personnel, continue to develop our security personnel, again with exposure to some of the highest areas and institutions of learning in these very countries. Madam Speaker, we will continue to pursue those because, again, as I mentioned, within the security environment, they are always learning because of the commonality of issues and areas that affect us all. Madam Speaker, when one looks at the omnibus bill before us, it is clear that the amendments suggested by the Honorable Attorney General will speak volume in our fight against crime, criminality, and violence in Trinidad and Tobago. The amendments, when one looks at it, I think it's very difficult for any right-thinking person. It's very difficult for anyone who has the Trinidad and Tobago interests at heart to not support the measures the amendment amended, because it can only give us, especially with respect to law enforcement and those involved in the fight against crime and criminality, it will give us the necessary tools, the necessary support, the necessary legislative framework to access, to interact, to treat with the issues that confront us. Madam Speaker, I want to candidly say that this bill would definitely support the fight against crime and criminality using the assistance measures in Trinidad and Tobago. To that end, Madam Speaker, I thank you very much.
Member for Nakuru.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I join the debate on the miscellaneous provisions, the mutual assistance in criminal matters, proceed of crime, Financial Intelligence Unit of Trinidad and Tobago, Customs and Exchange Control Bill 2017. Before I begin, I'd like to congratulate the speakers on our side, many of whom have made seminal contributions in the context of our remit to ensure that this government passes good legislation in the interests of the citizenry of Trinidad and Tobago. In this regard, all of our speakers on this side have called for a 3/5 majority, and they have called for this bill to be sent to the Joint Select Committee so that a comprehensive, wide-ranging discussion can take place. The member for Caroni East spoke about, and he was speaking in the context of the mutual assistance in criminal matters, Chapter 1124. He asked the question, can the people trust the central authority? He also spoke about the need for increased consultation. The member for St. Augustine, in the context of the proposed amendments of the Proceeds of Crime Act, he talked about the new amendment that allows money laundering to be determined by a magistrate. And he said he raised the point about this being an extremely complex matter. And the member for Oropuch East And he asked in the context of the Mutual Assistance in Criminal Matters Act, what is the justification for deleting Section 22? How many requests have been made for information on taxes, Trinidad and Tobago? How many have been refused to trigger you to make an amendment to say we are going to do away with this section of the law that gives you a right to refuse? Madam Speaker, in my contribution, I'll be looking at some general concerns before I get into the specifics of the bill. And the general concerns, the first item would deal with this bill. And the concern, it seems to be what I call exogenously inspired. It means that all the inspiration seems to be coming from abroad, that we are satisfying our requirements with our international partners, and not enough, in my view, not enough consideration is being given to our domestic circumstances and our national interests. The second general area I'd like to talk about is our systems capable of meeting the demands of the increased demands of the proposed legislation. My third concern was there adequate consultations with respective bodies in preparing these amendments? My fourth concern, would a joint select committee be more effective in producing better legislation? And fifthly, how much power, additional power, are we placing in the hands of the political directorate? And will this empowerment of the executive advance the development of our democracy? So I deal with the first point. Is this omnibus legislation about updating our laws along the lines of global best practices, or merely for international compliance? The Honorable Attorney General said in his contribution for this bill, and it's recorded in Hansard, the 17th November 2017, on page 38, and I quote, Trinidad and Tobago is being viewed as a serious nation committed to fighting the scourge of money laundering and financing of terrorism. My colleague, the member for Point 14, spoke a moment ago about a security nexus in which we are involved. And he talked about us adopting best practices from Colombia, Canada, India, Mexico, Netherlands, among others, which place us in a state of readiness to adopt best practices with money laundering and CFT legislation consistent with the amendments made in this bill. The member for Port of Spain North, St. Anne's West, in his contribution, he said, and I quote, this bill is just one of this government's initiatives to ensure we fulfill our international obligations. He also said that he sat in meetings with participants from the G20 countries, planning how to fight corruption and how the world should fight corruption. So one gets the sense from the contribution on the other side that Trinidad and Tobago is at the forefront of this fight on money laundering and global terrorism financing. And I repeat, the Attorney General said that we are being viewed as a serious nation. The problem with that assertion is that, as I've said before in previous contributions, facts are stubborn things. They don't go away. So this assertion that we are adopting best practices, how does this align with what our global partners are saying about our commitment to the fight against terrorism financing and money laundering? And I refer specifically, Madam Speaker, to a report, and it's entitled, The Brief on the State of Play on the International Tax Transparency Standard. And it was published in September 2017, just a few months ago. And this report was given by the OECD, and it's OECD 2017 report. Madam Speaker, contrary to what we heard today, that report summarizes that, and I quote from the report, which I'll make available to the media, Trinidad and Tobago underwent a fast-track review, but was unable to demonstrate sufficient progress to warrant a provisional upgrade in its ratings, and it remains non-compliant. End of quote. Now, that report was by the influential Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, in its 2017 report. The report says that massive progress has been made by many jurisdictions towards the exchange of financial information on request standard in the last 15 months. And I want to draw it to the attention of the national community that that 15 months covers the time when the PNM was in power. So they assessed on a fast-track review the progress Trinidad and Tobago had made during the time when the PNM was in office. Madam Speaker, our country was the only one among 147 to achieve a non-compliant rating based on reviews which began in 2016. 3 countries, Barbados, Israel, and St. Lucia, were upgraded by the OECD based on full peer reviews. So Barbados and St. Lucia, 2 of our CARICOM fellow countries, were upgraded based on full peer review. And I'm talking about this in the context that we are reviewing legislation to make us compliant with the international requirements. Antigua and Barbuda and Dominica were among 14 countries which were upgraded based on fast-track reviews, the same reviews that we went through. Antigua and Bermuda, Dominica were among 14 countries which were upgraded based on fast-track reviews. Country that I like to quote in terms of what we should be looking at to benchmark our practices: Singapore, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and the Turks and Caicos Islands were also rated largely compliant. Madam Speaker, tiny Nauru, with a population of 13,000, was able to demonstrate during the same period when we were reviewed, they were able to demonstrate significant progress. So the question is, why Nauru, with 13,000 persons, could demonstrate significant progress on a fast-track review, and Trinidad and Tobago could not meet the OECD standard? It means, Madam Speaker, that somehow something is not right in the state of Denmark. And the question we should be asking is, how is this legislation putting us in a position to improve our rating so that our partners, the same partners that the Minister of National Security say we are interacting with, they look up to us, and we are working to adopt and share best practices? How can we work to ensure that our standards are consistent with best practices so that we'll earn the respect, and we won't be the only country among 147 to be declared non-compliant on anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism financing matters? We should not rush to bring legislation only because international bodies are blacklisting Trinidad and Tobago, without considering the operationalization of these laws. And I refer to an article entitled "Another FATCA Fiasco." It's Newsday, December 14, 2017, page 9. And it says about the kinds of efforts we're discussing here today and the types of amendments to place us in a situation where we can be compliant. It says, and I quote, "Trinidad and Tobago did not have in place elements which were crucial to it achieving an effective exchange of information, leading the global forum to decide that this country, i.e. Trinidad and Tobago, will not move forward until it has acted on recommendations contained in the review report to achieve an improved legal and regulatory framework." Now, Madam Speaker, that was one of the reasons why the EU blacklisted Trinidad and Tobago, together with 17 countries, including some of our CARICOM partners. And these things are important. And that is why what I would like to hear from this in the wrapping up is the answer to the question, how is this legislation putting us in a position and in a place where we will be compliant with international requirements and standards? Or is this part of the requirement? Is this the total requirement? So that at the end of the day, as we did with FATCA, we are told that this is the important, and at the end of the day, if you don't pass this, things will happen. So here we're looking at this bill, and we need to get a sense of where does this bill fit in with our total compliance requirements. And Madam Speaker, these things matter, because as I read from the EU report, it said, and I quote, "It is important to note that the blacklist will be linked to EU legislation so that jurisdictions implicated will not be eligible for funds from the bloc except where it is to aid development." So, Madam Speaker, we are seeing some of the challenges that are faced by Trinidad and Tobago as we aspire to meet our obligations in money laundering, etc. Now, for us to operate and to gain the respect of the countries which were identified by the member for point 14, we have to ensure that we have a wholesale revamp of our international image. We have to ensure that we do something about the negative advisories. We spoke earlier today about human trafficking, and the member for point 14 sought to answer some of our concerns. We have to do something about returning ISIS fighters, the blacklisting by the EU, the rampant crime, the murders of foreigners in our country, etc., as all part of the package to ensure that this legislation is part of a suite of activities that will ensure that our country gets its rightful place in the international community. In respect of the FIU, and I'm dealing here with the fundamental question, is this legislation, where the impetus of it is exogenously inspired, or is it related to our circumstances? We looked in the legislation at amending certain clauses in the FIU Act. But I go back to first principles, and I'm reading from the Financial Intelligence Unit, an overview dated 2004 by the IMF and the World Bank. And what this is saying, and it's talking about what we need to do if you want to have an efficiently, effectively working FIU. It says, as a government agency, the FIU must be given a degree of autonomy necessary to fulfill its responsibilities while being held accountable for the results it achieves. It continued, although in establishing an FIU, authorities may feel the need to respond to the calls of international community, which we heard over and over again from the other side when we were discussing this bill. It says, authorities may feel the need to respond to the calls of the international community. Their decisions as to the FIU's functions and modalities of its operations need to be based on the country's own crime-fighting capabilities, crime-fighting policy objectives, resources, and priorities. So they're telling us that if we need to get to upgrade our institutions to deal with money laundering, to deal with the FIU and whatnot, there must be a component of responding and ensuring that these institutions can operate in the context of our local institutions or local practices, etc. There is another document in the context of what is really required if we want to make Trinidad a first world country. And I'll just draw attention to a new paradigm redesigning the US AML/CFL framework to protect national security and aid law. And what this said was that the suspicious activity reports of the FIU, for example, it says that although suspicious activity reporting is generally considered to be the engine which drives anti-money laundering and money laundering enforcement by the government, the study asserts, and I quote, interviews with past and present financial intelligence units heads as part of this project consistently raised figures of 80 and 90% of such reporting being of no operational value to active law enforcement investigations. Now, in the context of what we really need to do with the FIU, rather than the legislative approach which we have taken, our own director of the FIU has confirmed what the international best practices are saying, that in terms of what is necessary to get us to first world level of operations. And I read here from the Newsday, December 14th. So this is a recent document. The FIU director, we are not taking the profit out of crime. And she is saying areas in which FATF, and we hear that a lot on your side, say we must improve, include international cooperation, speedier processing of money laundering charges before the courts, enforcement of terrorism financing and terrorism laws, and measures related to proliferation financing. And she goes on to say, and I'll just read one last part, Trinidad and Tobago has to improve the effectiveness of its AML CFT regime. This is partly why the FIU got a largely compliant rather than a fully compliant rating. So I'm drawing attention to the Minister of National Security and the government and those on the other side about what is really, what needs to be done. So while we have an exogenous approach that we must comply, we must do like countries like Singapore, we will comply, but consistent with capacity building and consistent with ensuring that the institutions can meet the requirements of the demands of the legislation that comes as a result of passage of this bill. Our systems capable of delivering on the requirements of these new legislations. We are making the offense of money laundering either an indictable or summary offense. This could lead to more arrests and further burdens on the prison system. So we need systems in place which will ensure that the prison system can deal with the results of this legislation, if at all it is effective. Our prisons are overcrowded based on the information provided by the Ministry of the Attorney General and Legal Affairs on prison reform. Remand prison, 157% over capacity. Port of Spain prison, 290%. Carrera convict prison, 108%. We are told that there are approximately 3,667 prisoners in the prison system, according to information provided by the Attorney General. If we are to ensure that this legislation works, and we come and we pass legislation, and we still get bad ratings by the EU and the OECD and other global institutions, we must ensure that pari passu, we bring the legislation and we put in place the systems, upgrade the systems so that the legislation can be operationalized. In terms of the prison system, I refer to the Newsday, November 30th, 2017, editorial, and it speaks, talking about the prison system. Evidence mounts daily that Trinidad and Tobago penal system is in utter disarray. How is it possible that the most famous fraud accused in the recent memory could walk free of the Golden Grove, etc., etc.? I will not detain on that, except to make the point that the institutions must be upgraded. In respect of the Forensic Science Center, again, Newsday, November 22nd, 2017, Dr. Valerie Alexandrov used this word, simply put, nothing is being done to improve that institution. These were the words of him, of the retired pathologist, when asked about the conditions at the Forensic Science Center. Why do I talk about the Forensic Science Center? Because the firearm examiners, an integrated ballistics identification system, the IBIS, technicians assigned to the firearm sections of the Trinidad and Tobago Forensic Science Center, they do forensic ballistic testing on suspected firearms recovered from crime scenes, including drug interdiction, money laundering, etc. Madam Speaker, the upgrade of the IT infrastructure, the FIU, we need to look at that. In the development expenditure, $5 million was allocated in 2016, but only $670,000 spent. $5 million allocated in 2016, $670,000 spent alone on IT infrastructure for the FIU. In 2017, $5 million was again allocated, Madam Speaker, but only $67,000 spent. In 2018, there's no allocation whatsoever. So here we are looking about amending the FIU, putting in place legislation, supposedly making it in a better position to meet the global best practices standards so that we could be compliant with international rating agencies. And we have a situation where the IT infrastructure in that institution has not been financed according to the estimates of development expenditure. This is made here.
Sorry, for what year, sir?
It was $5 million in 2016 allocated, only $670,000 spent. In 2017, $5 million, but only $67,000 spent. And there's no allocation in 2018. IT infrastructure for the FIU. Good. Madam Speaker, in the context of that bit of information, an overview by the IMF and the World Bank, to which I referred to a moment ago, it says, and I quote, enhancing effectiveness of the FIU, in this case, might require increasing the automation of the reporting systems so that the information can automatically feed the FIU databases, thereby facilitating the gathering of various reports that are relevant to a single case. So what they're saying that it is critical that you have the information systems in the FIU, and therefore we will be passing this legislation, hopefully, and would not be able, the FIU would not be able to deliver on the requirements. The question, how much consultation took place prior to the introduction of these bills? The FIU, the same overview by the IMF and the World Bank, said, and I quote, it has been found productive to discuss the proposed FIU and the draft law with representatives of segments of the private sector that will be most directly affected by the establishment of the new AML CFT regime. So they are telling us in best practices that you need to consult. Nowhere in the presentation did we get by the Attorney General, no mention of consultations being held by the Attorney General when he laid the bill during his contribution in Parliament sitting on Friday, November the 17th, 2017. May I humbly suggest from this side that the following should have been, ought to, and still there is time, particularly if we use the Joint Select Committee approach, to ensure that the DPP is consulted, the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service is consulted, the FIU, the Commissioner of Police, the Law Association, the Chief Justice, the Board of Inland Revenue, the Controller of Customs, the Chief Magistrate, the Forensic Science Center, that this consultation should have taken place so that what we would have had today in this bill was the output and the benefits and the inputs of these important bodies that are necessary for the proper operationalization of the laws that we pass in Parliament. Should the bill be sent to a Joint Select Committee for proper ventilation and scrutiny, as was the case with FATCA? Madam Speaker, as a citizen, I hear people commending the Parliament when they look at the parliamentary channel for the kinds of insights that they get when they look at the Joint Select Committee in its deliberations with the, for example, the probe with the Inter-Island Ferry, with the Education Facilities Company, investigating the tampering of security cameras at Piarco International Airport and Wassa. And just days ago, we had a former Prime Minister who provided inputs to the National Security Joint Select Committee. And he was given the benefit of his expertise and advice and his years of service in government and in politics to our national security infrastructure. And it is one of the ways of capturing institutional memory and bringing this into our decision making. And I behoove the Attorney General to utilize the Joint Select Committee approach in ensuring that this legislation is the best that we can deliver. Now, issues with the proposed mutual assistance in criminal matters bill, my specific concerns. There's too much power in the hands of the political directorate, notwithstanding safeguards in the FIU legislation. Madam Speaker, the FIU Act, Section 22A, 1 states, the director shall not disclose or cause to be disclosed to the minister or to any other person, except in accordance with this act, the personal or financial details pertaining to an individual or business. So we see the framers of the FIU going out of their way to ensure that there is an arm's length relationship between the political directorate and the office of the institution of the FIU. Okay? But this legislation and these amendments seek to counter that arm's length relationship, and I'll tell you why. The Trinidad and Tobago Revenue Authority Bill 2010 states, in respect to the appointment of the Revenue Authority Director.
Which section, clause, provision in the amended bill that is before us that you're speaking to, before you go into anything else? Mm. Which provision?
I'm referring to the enhanced powers given to the minister via the central authority and the central authority and also the central authority and the revenue, the Board of Inland Revenue and the Customs and Excise Division.
Yeah, but if you could just provide me to assist me with the exact clause that you're dealing with, because I'm not going to permit you to widen this debate about the FIU bill and widen powers. Let me know the particular provision.
Madam Speaker, it deals with, I'm told, clause 5 of the bill of the Customs Act. Section 2, delete the definition where it talks about the clause would go into to empower the control to adjust the value of goods, etc. No.
No, he's correct. Customs Act have to do with the Revenue Authority.
The Customs Act has to do with the Revenue Authority? Because it's going to be absorbed by the... It is going to be absorbed by the Revenue Authority. Is that not true, Madam Speaker?
Yeah, and you talk about revenue generation.
I have no Revenue Authority bill before me. I think that is anticipatory. If you're dealing with clause 5 in the amendments that before us, I will permit that. But going into anything with the Revenue Authority, I won't.
Okay. So what is the ruling, Madam Speaker? She'll allow me. Okay. The Trinidad and Tobago Revenue Authority bill states in respect of the appointment of the Revenue Director, Section 16, the Minister shall appoint the Chief Executive Officer and the Deputy Chief Executive Officer for the authority on terms and conditions to be determined by the board. The Minister will have access indirectly to the FIU information, either through the proposed central authority, which is part of the amendments here, or the proposed tax authority, seeing as the Trinidad and Tobago Revenue Authority will absorb the functions of the agencies, such as the Board of Inland Revenue and the...
Anything with the Revenue Authority. There's nothing about the Revenue Authority here before me or any Revenue Authority bill. Okay? So if you're dealing with clause 5, which deals with the Customs Act and Customs and Excise, I will allow that.
Right. Okay. Madam Speaker, the central authority is targeted in this amendment. And I want to go now to the relationship between the Attorney General and the central authority. It says...
Your original 30 minutes is now up. You're entitled to 15 more minutes. You may proceed.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. It says the functions of the Attorney General have been delegated to the Central Authority Unit, and I'm reading here from the bill essentials that was supplied to us via the Parliament, and I'm reading here on page 2. The functions of the Attorney General have been delegated to the Central Authority Unit within the Ministry of the Attorney General, and all requests for extradition and mutual assistance made to and by Trinidad and Tobago are coordinated by the Central Authority Unit. Yeah. The unit helps foreign and domestic authorities obtain persons sought for prosecution and to serve sentence or to obtain evidence for the use in criminal matters. So in the mutual assistance, with respect to our foreign partners, the central authority is the critical organization in ensuring that we meet our obligations. The challenge is, Madam Speaker, that the necessary arm's-length relationship between the central authority and the minister, or the Attorney General, is not...
No. That is already a fact. There's an amendment. What you read there in the Bills Essential, which is not a document that is officially laid here. It is meant by the Parliament as a courtesy. Okay. All right? That position is not at all affected by the amendments. If you're going to talk about Clause 2, proceed.
Right. I'm talking about Clause 2 of the bill, which proposes to remove one of the many powers granted to the Central Authority by deleting Section 22(2)(k) of the Act, which empowers the authority to refuse a request that relates to a criminal offense. And the question that I have asked and proposed to ask under that is what is the benefit to be achieved by giving up that advantage that exists? And the question, if we give it up, and we're giving up a right of the citizens, then if we are giving up a right, then it must be subject to a special majority. Now, the concerns with the proceed, a special majority, if we're giving up basic rights, fundamental rights. Concerns with the Proceed of Crime Act legislation. The difference between summary and indictable offenses, and I think my colleagues have alluded to some of the weaknesses in the magistracy in terms of the workload, the backlog, the fact that the system would be clustered, etc. And the question is there any training that is going to be given to ensure that the magistrates are capable of handling complicated cases? Issues with the amendments to the FIU Act. We have no problem with amending the definition of the Egmont Group. Absolutely none. I think that was raised by my colleague from Caroni Central. The question is, however, the subscription to the Edmond Group of FIUs for 2017 was apparently not paid. For 2016, $36,783 was paid. In 2017, $58,720 was allocated, but the revised estimates indicated zero. Therefore, it seems that it was not paid for 2017. They allocated the same amount this year, and we hope that it will be paid. So the only point I'm making is that we are coming here, we are passing a legislation, we are doing things, but when it comes to the fundamental support systems that are necessary to give effect and operationalize the law, we find major fundamental deficiencies. Madam Speaker, reference to section, I'm talking here, the Financial Intelligence Unit, section 8F, it says, the FIU may disseminate financial intelligence and information to local and foreign authorities and affiliates within the intelligence community. The question is, the matter of who is the affiliates within the within the intelligence community. It's open-ended and perhaps should have been looked at. The Section B, Section 4B.
You're talking about Section 8F as it currently exists? Because that is not before us. So if you're asking a question about the local affiliates, that was for a debate that is long gone. So I'm not going to allow that. Please, one, I just want to advise you that if what you're doing is by summarization by what other speakers have already presented, I just want to warn that I consider that is bordering on tedious repetition. What we're talking about here are amendments and not what you may have had a view about what exists already.
If we have legislation before us and there are implications of the legislation in terms of the operationalization, is that not relevant? I'll go on. Closing comments. We are passing legislation, and without understanding that the legislation requires additional support systems in order to meet our international obligations. I wish to remind those opposite that it is critical in passing good legislation that we have the best input from citizens and interest groups in Trinidad and Tobago. In my considered view, this legislation does not adequately reflect the needs of Trinidad and Tobago if this legislation is supposed to make us compliant with international obligations. And that is why we will come here and pass legislation, and we will continue to receive ratings that are non-compliant, that tell us that we are not meeting our obligations and requirements. All I would like to do to plead to the other side is to be a little humble, listen, get the inputs of others, and we'll have a better first world country. Thank you very much.
Member for Point of View.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As I rise to contribute in this debate, firstly let me wish you, Madam Speaker, and your family and the staff of the Parliament a very happy and bright 2018, and my colleagues on the other side a very bright and productive 2018 in the Parliament. Madam Speaker, I want to start off by saying in this debate, and using the Attorney General's answer on November 17, 2017, as part of my build-up. And there are certain things that the Attorney General had mentioned and stated in his answer about this particular piece of omnibus legislation that is before us today. Firstly, he said he just came off a plane from Guyana attending a CFATF meeting. And throughout his contribution, he talked about FATF, CFATF, the Berlin Declaration, follow the money, third round evaluation, fourth round evaluation, Madam Speaker. And I want to start off on page 40 of his Hansard. I think it's page 40, but really and truly part of his Hansard, where he talked about during the Manning administration that up to April 2010, they were able to get us off the grey list, Madam Speaker. It is somewhere in his Hansard, and I will get that shortly. Now, I want to refer to actual information that transpired between May 2010 and the People's Partnership led by the Honorable Kamala Persad-Bissessar to 2015, Madam Speaker. Because I remember around in 2012, Madam Speaker, it was the then Prime Minister, opposition leader present, and under her stewardship that we were able, and she announced right here in Parliament, that she was able to get the Trinidad and Tobago off the grey list from the FATF in Paris. And because I don't know where the Attorney General was given the impression that under the Manning administration up to April 2010, that the country was able to get off the grey list. and we did nothing between 2010 and 2015. So I will want to quote, Madam Speaker, a answer right here in the Parliament by the then Prime Minister, present opposition leader, Madam Speaker, to start off my debate. You just bear with me. And the other thing where I find it, Madam Speaker, in the crosstalk earlier on, I heard the Attorney General said, why we need a 3/5 majority. And I just want to state, all my other colleagues had mentioned that there's a need for a 3/5 majority. And I want to remind the Attorney General, in September 19, 2014, under the Miscellaneous Provision Bill number 2, the People's Partnership came with the same bills and amendments right here in this House, and we brought it via special majority, Madam Speaker. I want to just quote the Member of Parliament for Digo-Martin North East, the Honourable Colman Burt, where he said when we were piloting and debating those bills, it requires a 3/5 majority. They do not have 26 people here in the House. So unless some people mysteriously appear out of the air, they will require the opposition vote, Madam Speaker. Why I said that is because some of the same pieces of legislation that the Attorney General is piloting here today, at that point in time, it required 3/5, and we brought it as a 3/5. We had a special majority at the time in the House. We could have waited until our 3 members returned to pass it, but we felt that it was good law, and we were able to work with the opposition at the time, and they supported those pieces of legislation. The difference between then and now, Madam Speaker, is the same pieces of legislation that the Attorney General is bringing here today. We are asking him to consider either 3/5 or a joint select committee, Madam Speaker. And why not go to a joint select committee using it is in the standing order? Because in my view, this joint select committee is able to bring the different stakeholders, both houses, the Senate and the House, together, and be able to bring the experts together in front of the team, the Joint Select Committee, and be able to bring proper and good legislation for the benefit of this country, Madam Speaker. And it would not be, when it comes back to the House, it would be a piece of legislation that would not be contentious, and both sides can agree on it, Madam Speaker. So I really don't understand why, and I'm hoping in 2018.
To move on to your next point, please. Excuse me, I'd just like to ask and remind all members that a certain dignity is required in this House. Member for Point Appear, please continue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I listened to the member of Point 40, and he talked about, and is winding up, that he's hoping that we would support this piece of legislation. But I want to say that in supporting white-collar crime, we do support white-collar crime. We do support corruption, again, the fight against corruption, Madam Speaker. But we do not, Madam Speaker, it is our duty to bring here in this House proper legislation, Madam Speaker. We will not support legislation that infringes the rights of the people of Trinidad and Tobago at the expense of their rights enshrined in the Constitution, Madam Speaker. You see, Madam Speaker, this government tends to hide behind flowery language, Madam Speaker, and try to say that we are unpatriotic. But I want to let them know that that is something I'll deal with later on, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, under the amendment for the Mutual Assistance Criminal Matters, Section 20 on Clause 2, they really want to, the Attorney General wants to remove and delete the extradition part of that clause, right? Clause 2 of the bill would amend the mutual assistance in criminal matters by deleting Section 22(2)(k), which empowers the central authority to refuse a request that relates to a criminal offense under the tax laws of a Commonwealth country. Madam Speaker, and both the Attorney General, the member for Laventille West, and the member for Port of Spain North St. Anne's West, related that clause to the Berlin Declaration, Madam Speaker. Is there any answer? Madam Speaker, the Berlin Declaration was a declaration signed by countries to facilitate a multilateral competent authority agreement, which would lay the groundwork for automatic exchange of financial account information in compliance with global forum standards, Madam Speaker. And so, Madam Speaker, these are principles coming out of that Berlin Declaration, but it is up to the respective jurisdiction, the domestic law in Trinidad and Tobago, that you are responsible for bringing good law to assist in the exchange of information. But the Attorney General has seen it fit to remove and so that a tax law offense becomes automatic extradition. You can extradite automatically, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, we must insist that we do not support corruption that is erroneous. Madam Speaker, so I go back to this Berlin Declaration. And I really would like the Honorable Attorney General, in his winding up, to explain how the Berlin Declaration, how it relates to Clause 2, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, as I said earlier, between 2005 and 2010, the country was on the grey list. Under the People's Partnership, we were able to remove it off the grey list, Madam Speaker. And I want to say that, and I want to read something here into the Hansard, October 19, 2012, Madam Speaker, by the then Prime Minister. As a responsible government, we did not panic, and to broadcast the deleterious effects of the non-compliance with the FATF recommendations, because we do not wish to undermine investor confidence.
Just asking exactly where are you quoting from? That document is from where?
This document is from the Newsday article, Trinidad Express, October 19, 2012.
Could you just repeat? Because you said it was a Newsday article in the Trinidad Express.
No, I mean,
so which one? That's not a standing order. I'm asking you.
Trinidad.
Members. Member for Point up here.
Speaker, I'm quoting from a Trinidad Express article, October 19, 2012. TNT removed from the FATF blacklist, Madam Speaker. I also quoted in that same article from the leader of the Prime Minister at that time, the present leader of the opposition, and I quote, as a responsible government, she's quoted as saying, as a responsible government, we did not panic, and to broadcast the deleterious effects of the non-compliance with the FATF recommendations, because we did not wish to undermine investor confidence, as we always say, our commitment first is to Trinidad and Tobago, she explained. And that was when we were able to get off the grey list, Madam Speaker. And also in that same article, Madam Speaker, she also quoted the director, the CFATF director, Calvin Wilson, in which he praised the efforts of this government, the PP government, and requested help in assisting 10 other countries in becoming compliant, Madam Speaker. So what we are saying is that between 2010 to in 2012, the PP government was able, under the stewardship of the then Prime Minister, to be able to get this country off the grey list, Madam Speaker, by the very good work of the then Attorney General, Anna Ramlogan, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, so when the other side talks about us being on the grey list under the PP government, I want to really say that I'm hoping that the Attorney General could explain that misconception that they are presenting to this government, to this country, that under the PP government, we are on the grey list, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, under the partnership, we were always following the money, Madam Speaker. And I'll tell you how. the member for St. Joseph talked about the Edmond Group a lot in his Hansard, Madam Speaker. I want to let this country know that it was under the PP government that we signed up in the Edmond Group, Madam Speaker. And that was to fulfill recommendation 29 of FATF, Madam Speaker, and that made us compliant. So when we talk about the Edmond Group, and it appears that the Attorney General is doing all this good work about following the money and asset forfeiture, I want to remind and let the Attorney General know that we were the one under Larry Howai, the Minister of Finance, that started. Madam Speaker, what is the record of the PNM in fighting money laundering and terrorism financing in the past 2 years? When the Attorney General piloted this debate, this bill, this omnibus legislation, he presented no facts and figures over the last 2 years under his government what they have been doing in fighting money laundering and terrorism, Madam Speaker. So I hope in his wind-up he's able to present some facts and figures and data, because I understand even when the Point 40 member was talking about money laundering, he said there were no convictions under money laundering, Madam Speaker. And he had to be corrected by the Attorney General. He had to be corrected by the Attorney General. And so I'm wondering, who is the Minister of National Security, Madam Speaker?
Good question.
Well, I think there's three of them. There's three of them.
Madam Speaker, the Attorney General boasts about an interministerial committee that is set up. He talked about this in his answer on page 42, Madam Speaker. And in his contribution, the Attorney General boasts about an interministerial committee and team established to drive the scourge and crime out. I want to tell the Attorney General and the people, not even that was created by the PNM, Madam Speaker. That was created by the People's Partnership in 2013. And I see the Attorney General shaking his head, so I will quote from the Hansard of Larry Howai on September 19, 2014, page 537, and I quote, "Mr. Speaker, since 2012, we have continued our efforts to ensure that Trinidad and Tobago remains compliant and to strengthen our AML-CFT regime. After the November 13 meeting of the CFATF plenary, a decision was taken by Cabinet to appoint an interministerial committee chaired by the Attorney General and also comprising the Minister of National Security and himself, he was then the Minister of Finance. The committee is vested with the responsibility of taking all measures needed to ensure that Trinidad and Tobago successfully exits the third round process and achieves a high level of compliance in the fourth round. To this end, Mr. Speaker, the committee meets regularly and the various stakeholders, agencies, and provides strategic direction to ongoing national compliance effort, Madam Speaker." So that was started under the PP government, and the Attorney General is continuing it, Madam Speaker. And I have no problem with that, Madam Speaker, because government is a continuum. This government, on the other side, appears like if nothing has happened between 2010 and 2015. The world didn't exist before September 2015, and they just came into power, and they're now creating all these laws and regulations, Madam Speaker. I want to let them know that government is a continuum, and let us try to have the quorum and understand that they might not agree with what our policies and procedures and laws that we might have put in place and brought, but they're developing on it, Madam Speaker. The Attorney General talked about the third round. And when you read his Hansard in the first 3 or 4 pages, he wanted to compliment the PP government, Madam Speaker, for the good work that we did on CFATF and FATF, Madam Speaker. But he couldn't help himself. He couldn't help himself, Madam Speaker. And really, the PP government did good work on that for the good of the country, Madam Speaker, not for the good of Kamala Prasad, the assessor, or the member of Sister. It was for the good of the country and to instill investor confidence. And that is why you would have seen between 2010 and 2015 growth in this country, Madam Speaker. What we are seeing right now, Madam Speaker, is something that this whole country is shocked and cannot compare between 2010 and 2015, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, he talked about the fourth round evaluation, as if something was wrong with the fourth round evaluation. I want to say, Madam Speaker, that we are a small sovereign country. And under the students of the Anand Ramloga and the last Attorney General, he was able to carry this country into the fourth round. Now, the Attorney General, President Attorney General, might say, well, we were premature because you have 2022, which is the outer time date, Madam Speaker. But, and what's wrong with trying to achieve for higher standards, Madam Speaker? And that is why, under the PP government, under the Kamala-led, Prasad-Bissessar-led administration, the standard was so high, Madam Speaker. Because what you are seeing now, they are chastising us for going into the fourth round evaluation. And I am saying, who are they chastising? Are they chastising the technocrats that really are the ones that do the work, Madam Speaker? Because it's not Kamala Prasad-Bissessar, the member for Superior. Right? And I would think that the Attorney General should feel proud as a country that we were the first country to go into the fourth round under CFATF and FATF, Madam Speaker. We weren't? So, Madam Speaker, so coming out of that fourth round evaluation, you would have a lot of deficiencies. I grant you that. But it's a learning process that the technocrats of the ministry and FIU and so forth would have been able to learn from the deficiencies to move forward to make us a better country come 2022, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, there's nothing wrong in going to the fourth round. They are making this country feel that there's something wrong by putting the last Attorney General went into the fourth round. Nothing is wrong with that. It's striving for greatness, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, and nothing wrong with work. Nothing is wrong with work. Madam Speaker, when we talk about the Proceeds of Crime Act, Madam Speaker, which is clause 3 of the bill, Madam Speaker, the Poker Act, Madam Speaker, I want to ask the Attorney General, why are they bringing, under what recommendation, using CFATF, which is a subset of FATF, that they are asking for money laundering to be tried summarily, Madam Speaker? Because I don't think, from all my readings, that they have an issue, as it stands right now, being an indictable offense, Madam Speaker. And I want to remind this country and the Attorney General, it was under the PP government that we brought money laundering as a standalone offense, Madam Speaker. And that was because we were serious about money laundering, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, in his wind-up, I asked, why bring it as a summary in the Poker Act, the clause 3, Madam Speaker? What was the need for that, Madam Speaker? Because in all my readings, I have not seen any recommendation for that, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, when we look at the clause 5 in the Customs Act, where you are now asking business individuals, custom brokers, and others to keep documentation for 6 years, 7 years, right? 7 years now, Madam Speaker. It was 1 year before. And the reason for that is about, if I remember in his answer, is about under the Customs Act or the Customs Department, Customs Division, it's a big revenue generator, Madam Speaker. And they're talking about being able to go back and assess your books over a period up to 6 or 7 years. Right now, I think the limit is 1 year, Madam Speaker. Why so long that you are now asking business individuals to be able to, people can come and check your books and reassess your goods that you would have paid duties on 4 or 5 years ago. And now you're asking them, let me see your books. And if they have enough evidence based on fictitious, fake, or whatever, let me reassess you, and then you have additional duties to pay, Madam Speaker. And that could also hamper your business, Madam Speaker, because if you are charged and you have to pay off this offense, then your business automatically shuts down because you're not allowed to import any other thing until you pay off the offense, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, I want to ask the Attorney General in his wind-up again, why do that to the business sector in this country, Madam Speaker? Madam Speaker, I want to come back to Madam Speaker, I want to correct something on the answer. In my exuberance early on in my debate, I said I support white-collar crime. I really want to say that we do not on this side support white-collar crime. Right. Because I know the Attorney General is very slick. He's very slick. He's very slick. He would, in his wind-up, he would chastise me, Madam Speaker, and my colleagues. And I also want to say we do not support corruption on this side, Madam Speaker. I know he's a very slick individual, Madam Speaker. So I know I take cognizance of that, and I want to correct that on the hand side, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, as an opposition, I think we fully support the principles of ensuring Trinidad and Tobago becomes compliant with any global requirements to prevent us from being blacklisted, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, again, I also want to say we support the fight against white-collar crime, Madam Speaker. And we also support the fight against money laundering, Madam Speaker. I really hope that the Attorney General really listens to some of our contributions on this side and does not glibly pass it by, Madam Speaker, because I know his heart is in the right place for the country, Madam Speaker.
Sometimes.
So we have always supported.
Do not become too exuberant, please.
No. Madam Speaker, so we are here today to really ensure that we pass good law here this afternoon, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, therefore we must, as we say, we support the principles of ensuring Trinidad and Tobago is compliant as much as possible, and we work to ensure that Trinidad and Tobago reach very far and really restore investor confidence in this country, Madam Speaker. With those few words, I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Baratarisano.
Speaker. Madam Speaker, I want to thank you for allowing me to join this debate. I just want to say that, as the Member of Parliament Point of Peer said, that we are against money laundering, we are against white-collar crime, we are against, corruption. However, this bill, as I looked at it, and I've been looking at it for a while now, and I thought it was going to come back later. So perusing the bill, I realized something, that this bill has the capacity to shut down the economy. It's going to shut down this economy to such an extent that I don't think the Attorney General understands what he's doing. I know you're going forward with global forum stuff and FATF and whatever it is. But when you look at the bill itself, this bill is like a sledgehammer slapping up the people of Trinidad and Tobago and taking it and hitting them down on the ground. This is what's happening. And I'm going to show why. Number one, you're starting off with there's an omnibus bill, and this is moving through it. I'm not going to be long, Madam Speaker, but this bill starts off where it's amended to delete Section 22K of the Act, which empowers the authority to refuse a request that relates to a criminal offence on the tax laws of a Commonwealth country or other country, from what I realize. It could have been refused before under the opinion of the Central Authority. When I looked at this bill, I looked at it in detail and tried to find out why would somebody do something like this? Because we have already had the FATCA bill that is going to talk to each country. They were going to speak to each other. All it has not been assented. The FATCA bill was going to talk about tax and tax laws. and US. When I looked at it deeply, I realized that this is a bill designed to extradite Jack Warner. This whole thing. And this is what he's doing. And exactly when you look at it, it's to maybe okay, forget, I take that back, Madam Speaker. It is designed to extradite a citizen, a single person who the opposition, the government cannot extradite at present. Because with this, and anyone, once you remove that section, Section 22K, and the tax laws of a Commonwealth country is a criminal offense, and they can be sent off no matter what, without any jurisdiction of the central authority. So I'm saying to you, Madam Speaker, that is one way that this is hitting a person on the head and strangling the thing. The other part of it, no one has really mentioned it, but this bill, the last part of the bill, totally slipped in. This will disallow, and I'm looking at Section 4, the Exchange Control Act, Section 4. It says they shall be exempted from the provision of Section 23(1)(e) of the Act, the exportation from Trinidad and Tobago by any traveler on his person or in his baggage, the bearer negotiable instruments as follows, which are to the extent of $5,000 US currency, amounting to more than $5,000 currency in value, in respect to which a declaration is made to the Comptroller of Customs. So what it is saying to people of Trinidad and Tobago, and I want you to be aware of this, right now you can take out up to how much, as much money as you desire. But when you reach the other side, United States, England, if it's more than 10,000 US, you have to declare it. Now they are putting exchange control methods in place, as the Minister of Finance has said he's going to do, and say, if you are leaving this country with anything more than $5,000 US, or you have to declare it to the Comptroller of Customs. And I think people have to be aware of that, because people tend to go a little more like about bearable instruments, etc., to the point of, let's say, 9,000, 10,000, and declare it. Why can't it be $10,000 as what is abroad in the other countries, what is being designated? Also, Madam Speaker, the entry into Trinidad and Tobago of 20,000 TT or $5,000 US must be reported to the customs. Now, if somebody takes money outside and they're coming back in, now $5,000 is much more when you calculate it 6.7 something to 1, more than $20,000. I still cannot understand the significance of putting $20,000 TT and $5,000 US. Should it not be similar to that of, if you're going international acceptance, 10,000 US? And finish that at the honor custom declaration form. So I think the amendments should speak to that, Madam Speaker. The other thing about it, Madam Speaker, the customs. You say on Section 274A of the Customs, I think it's the Customs Act, that all books subject to the subsection 2, every importer, exporter, agent, custom broker, custom clerk, warehouse keeper, or operator of a port, transit shed, or sufferance wharf who conducts any transaction in this act or any customs law shall keep or cause to be kept at his place of business or residence all books, records, documents, etc. for a period of 6 years. You're talking about warehouse clerks, Madam Speaker. Those are fellows in the warehouse who really push the thing around the place. And from the date of goods subject to the transactions that were entered. You also come and say afterwards on the Act, the Custom Act, that if someone, this is 2B, the Custom Act, the Amendment 2B, where an importer receives notice of an adjustment in accordance with subsection 2A, which results in further duties of taxes being payable, and the importer or consignee fails to commence proceedings before the appeal board within 6 months from the date he receives notice of the adjustment, the comptroller may refuse entry of or delivery of subsequent shipments of the importer. They should continue that amendment and say, in order to shut down his business, because that's what they're going to do. You see, Madam Speaker? You see, Madam, that's what it's going to do that. They should continue the amendment, because they did not say how long the Comptroller of Customs will take to change or look at the further duties to goods. Is it between 1 and 6 years? And suppose in the 5th and a half year, the Comptroller of Customs comes and indicates to the person, you have to pay X amount of duties. And he has goods already coming on the sea, on the shore, coming from wherever it may be, containers. Are you going to shut that person down? Because in the 6th year, in the 5th and a half year, you are given a notice to pay duties. Are you now going to shut that person down and say you cannot bring in any more goods, leave it on the port, pay store rent, pay this, pay that, until you settle this one? And you and I know, Mr. Madam Speaker, when you go to appeal, it takes time. It takes time for a decision to be made. So when that decision is being made, that person will be paying store rent, wharf rent, and whatever may be, interest on payments, goods, everything locked down, because the Comptroller of Customs has decided he's not going to get any more subsequent payments. So this is what's happening here. So all in all, and then the amendment goes on and on to say a police officer is the one could come into your house or residence or place of business, and as I say, if you block him or if you make any sort of negative movement, he will be able to charge you to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars, and you basically have to go and indicate to them why this happened. So, Madam Speaker, what I'm saying, this whole amendment, the amendment of this whole bill, it sounds nice in words. Anti-money laundering, corruption, white-collar crime, nice words. Similar words to say the war on drugs. When the war on drugs was a nice word, you're going to go after the war on drugs. All the war on drugs did was jail black people in the United States of America. That's all it did. But the words were nice. Then you had the war on terror, the weapons of mass destruction. All of those are nice words in order to do negative things. This is a negative bill for this country. This bill, Mr. Madam Speaker, is going to cause people to take their assets out of Trinidad and Tobago. They are not going to buy any real estate. They're not going to go to the banks. It's going to have cash payments. It's going to have hoarding of US dollars. And a lot of people have already said these type of bills and the action and the activity that the banks, and when you go to a bank and what they ask you at a bank and everything at a bank makes you feel like a criminal. They have indicated that they will leave this country and go to a country that allows investment without these type of headaches. So, Madam Speaker, it may sound good. It may sound nice. And it's going to go hit the papers that's white-collar crime, corruption, anti-money laundering. But deep down inside this bill is a horrible destruction of the economy and the attack on the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Attorney General.
Madam Speaker, I would like to echo the welcome of my learned colleague from Pointe-a-Pierre, the Chief Whip, in welcoming us all to 2018 for the first time in this Honourable House. I do hope that this year will be a significant year of endeavour, production and benefit for the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. And that is directly relevant to the very bill that we have before us, which I now have the pleasure to wind up. Madam Speaker, we've heard from several of my colleagues opposite. May I just, as a matter of housekeeping, inquire if you're going to be taking the break at 4:30, Madam Speaker?
Let me ask, how long are you likely to be in your winding up?
I had proposed to take my entire time, Madam Speaker.
So therefore, I think subject to anything else the leader and the whip may wish to say, I think we would take it at 4:30. So you really have like about 3 minutes on this side.
Thank you. I was hoping that you would have said perhaps we would take it now and save us the 3 minutes of interruption. Madam Speaker, this is a very important bill for Trinidad and Tobago. My colleagues opposite have had the benefit of inspection of the matters before the House, certainly since we first started this debate in November 2017. Indeed, this bill itself is not one which just appeared in November 2017. We heard from my learned colleague, Carney East, that he specifically asked why was this bill allowed to lapse in the last parliamentary session, and he wondered if there was something different. In fact, this bill was laid on the order paper of the last session of Parliament, and it did not lapse. We specifically carried over the work onto this side of the Parliament, and we did so really because there was a very specific strategy by the government in how we would approach our post-observation follow-up reporting to the Caribbean Financial Action Task Force and to the Financial Action Task Force. That's very important to bear in mind because we've had an inquiry coming from several members opposite, in particular Carney Central and from Naparima, asking if Trinidad and Tobago was being put through the loop, put through the hoops, really in what Naparima called an exogenous situation, where we're being compelled by outside entities to uphold a standard without any real benefit for Trinidad and Tobago. And the truth is that it's perhaps a mix of the two. It is definitely within the conscious reflection of the people of Trinidad and Tobago that we must improve our own situation as a nation for the benefit of the people of Trinidad and Tobago, but that we must also meet with compliance in the global environment. And this is specifically so as it relates to matters of finance and taxation, which are core feature elements of this particular bill. That's all the much more readily apparent as the citizens of this country have followed the debate on FATCA. They followed the conversation on the Global Forum, even if some of my colleagues opposite didn't pay full attention to, and I'll come to that in a short moment. But the point is that Trinidad and Tobago is definitely engaged in a parliamentary debate for a mixed purpose, one, to improve our current situation for the people generally, and secondly, to meet with international compliance standards, which we are bound to observe as a nation.
4:30.
People's interests on varying platforms
at 5 o'clock. This House is now suspended.